to see him at the park.
What, about how him and I talked about
how you guys are talking.
Of history's embrace, Captain's quarters sets the pace with Captain Mayhem at the helm. A voyage of knowledge, a story to round. Captain's quarters weekly delight, where history's treasures take flight. Led by Mayhem, Longwood, and Joe, they explore the past, row by row. Navigator Longwood charts the course, guiding listeners to knowledge's source. Cartographer Joe, with maps in hand, unveils the secrets of time.
Hi, welcome to Captain's Quarters Podcast. This is episode 187. How many are we going to be able to do, Davey? We're going to be old when we're done, I'm sure. Hi. So it is May 26th, and it is Memorial Day, and we're probably going to have a few things in here. I am betting the farm that Davey has already made at least one Memorial Day video.
Yes.
Have you? Yeah, that's what I thought.
We have one video about why we celebrate Memorial Day.
Good. And we have a special guest that we did not tell anybody about because I wanted to keep it a secret, but the two people I wanted to keep it a secret from, I think already figured it out. So much for me trying to do a secret. So, Davey, how do we find the show?
For almost 4 weeks, and then I got them both back. And
Hey, Davey, there it is. Thank you very much. If you want to follow our show, go to YouTube. Use that QR code. We want you to like us, follow us, and subscribe to us. That way, you're in the know and on board for every show we do every Monday night at 8 p.m. We love having everybody there, and we hope that you will be joining us. I see Michigan is here, and Jacksonville is here, and Panama City is on board, and I see Ransom Mayhem. I see Paula. I see Nightingale, one of the ones I thought I might be able to pull the wool over somebody's eyes on our guest tonight. And Sky Jockey's here also. Very good. And let's go ahead and kick off with a good joke. Well, oh, wait, let me correct that. Let's go ahead and kick off with a mini mayhem joke. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but let's go ahead and try it.
Ahoy, mates. Mini Mayhem here with Joke of the Week. Sponsored by our good friend Travis Rami of Salt City Comics. What is a pirate's favorite non-alcoholic drink? Think about it, and I will give you the answer at the end of the show.
A non-alcoholic drink. Well, I'll have to think about that one because I'm not even aware that pirates like non-alcoholic drinks, but we'll find out at the end of the story, at the end of the show. This Week in History, Davey, sponsored by our good friends, Ancient City Sirens, Miss Gina, and the dancers of Ancient City Sirens. They're wonderful. We're working on a good commercial for them, but until then, we just speak nice about them, and they sponsor us here. Go ahead, Davey. Put it out there.
We begin this week nautical history on May 26, 1956. A fire on board the aircraft carrier USS Bennington in Narragansett Bay off Rhode Island kills 103 crew. May 27, 1905. Japanese fleet destroys the Russian East Sea Fleet in the Battle of Tsushima, the only decisive clash between modern steel battleships in history. May 28, 1967. Francis Cheshire arrives home at Plymouth from the round-the-world trip. May 29, 1652. Battle of Goodwin Sands off Folkestone, Kent. English general at sea Robert Blake drives out Dutch fleet under Lieutenant Admiral Martin Tromp. May 30th, 1539, Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto's expedition of 10 ships and 700 men land in Florida. May 31st, 1916, Battle of Jutland, largest naval battle of World War I between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet, which killed 8,645 in an inconclusive battle but strategic British victory. German fleet never pushed to sea again in World War I. And finally, on June 1st, 1774, Boston Port Act. Following the passage of the act, the British government orders Port of Boston closed to punish colonists for the Boston Tea Party. And that was this week in nautical history.
Good job, Davey. Good job. There was some interesting parts in that one again, as always. And we'll just jump right in. I'm kind of moving quickly here, maybe more so than I normally do, because I really want to bring our guest out because we're going to have some fun talking to him. So let's do the quote of the week by Spyglass Travel. We're working on a good commercial for them. It's going to these commercials, when Davey and I get them done, we're going to start working on them next week. You watch. They're going to be great. So Davey, Spyglass Travel. Let's see. Important principles may and must be inflexible. I like that. That's a good one. Abraham Lincoln. Spyglass Travel, ladies and gentlemen. If you want a good walking tour of St. Augustine, by all means, call up Spyglass Travel. Not only will you get a great tour of the historic city of St. Augustine, you'll get a 1 hour walking around cardiovascular exercise, and it's well worth it. Good quote, Davey. And of course, this brings us to 8 bells, and we have 4, plus I have 1 extra. So Davey, let's see what we got. Oh yes, and Marco's Pizza. I got to tell you, we had Marco's Pizza Saturday night. Yes, Saturday night, I ordered Marco's Pizza, and the big bosses were at the store. And when the delivery arrived, there was 1 extra box. And I told the driver, I don't think I ordered this. And he said, yeah, you did. Don't worry about it. And so when we got it up into the kitchen and opened it up, it was a huge cheese bread loaf with all the sauces. And the bosses had written on the inside of the pizza box how they loved all the things that we're doing and the support we give them and everything else. And so it was a gift, kind of, so to speak. So made me feel really cool. So we're going to really do some fun stuff for them and see how that commercial comes out. For now, though, let's do these 8 bells. George Robert Went Jr. Now, before I read anything about him, I'm going to tell you my favorite normism. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and I'm wearing milk-bone underpants. That is my favorite of all of them. That I just love it. And one more thing I'm going to say. We have a 2-year-old, almost 2-year-old granddaughter, and she doesn't really talk. So there was a clip of Fraser and his wife with their little baby in the show, and she's chastising him for bringing the baby into the bar. And you'll never learn anything by hanging out in a bar. And Norm walks in, and the baby goes, "Hi, Norm." So I'm going to start taking my great-grandchildren to the bar so I can teach them to talk. On that note, let's talk about Mr. Went. He was a fine actor. An American actor from 82 to 93, played Norm Peterson on the NBC sitcom Cheers, which earned him 6 consecutive nominations for the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. After Cheers ended, he starred in his own sitcom, The George Wendt Show, 95, but it was canceled after only a few episodes. Wendt also appeared in the films Airplane 2, No Small Affair, Fletch, Little Rascals 94, Man of the House, Spice World, Outside Providence, Santa Buddies, and Sandy Wexler. He was just 76 years old, ladies and gentlemen. What a loss. Kathleen Hughes, born Elizabeth Margaret von Gerkan, was an American actress who appeared during the golden age of Hollywood. She appeared in 5 motion pictures for Universal Studios, including the cult film It Came from Outer Space. Hughes co-starred with Edward G. Robinson in a 1953 crime drama, The Glass Web, and appeared in an adventure film that year, The Golden Blade. She played in episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, 77 Sunset Strip, Gomer Pyle USMC, and I Dream of Jeannie. She was 96 years old, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Allen David, often abbreviated PAD, was an American writer of comic books, novels, television films, and video games. His notable comic work includes an award-winning 12-year run on The Incredible Hulk as well as runs on Aquaman, Young Justice, Spy Boy, Supergirl, Fallen Angels, Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099, Captain Marvel, and X-Factor. David earned multiple awards for his work, including a 92 Eisner Award, a 93 Wizard Fan Award, a 96 Huckster Award, and a 2007 Julie Award, and also a 2011 GLAAD Media Award. He was 68 years old. Leslie Dilley was a Welsh art director and production designer during his film career from the 1970s to 2000. He won the Academy Award for Best Art Directions twice for Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and in 1977, and Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. Sharing this both times with Norman Reynolds, Dilley received additional Best Art Direction nominees for Alien, Empire Strikes Back, The Abyss. Apart from art direction, Dilley was a production designer for The Exorcist 3, Casper, 95, and Son of the Mask, and he was 83 years old. Those are our four, but I have one more extra. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you probably heard about the ship running into, there it is right there, running into the Brooklyn Bridge, I believe it was, if I got it right. And it was a tall ship, and and this was the Mexican Navy, ladies and gentlemen, and two of their shipmates were in the rigging when it hit the rail and hit the ship, or hit the bridge, and it cost them their lives. And on a day like today, is that one of them, Davey? Davey? You're muted.
Yes, that's
Is that one of them? Very
Yes.
good. Wow. She looks familiar. This is Mexico, though, right?
Yep, and this is the other one.
Okay. And this is the other one. Ladies and gentlemen, they were both young. They worked in their military for their country, so I'm sure they were patriotic towards their country. And ladies and gentlemen, they lost their lives in the service of their country. And on a day like today, Memorial Day, it is fitting that we at least say something about them. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, raise your glass and a toast to those that have passed, and support to their fans, their families, and their loved ones. Their impact on the world will never be forgotten. 8 bells, Davey. Very good, Davey, very good. That puts us right into This Week in History, sponsored by Dick's Wings, which has a commercial, so I don't have to sit here and talk, and you don't have to listen to me. So, Davey, let's kick off. Where does the captain take his hungry crew for a good lunch special? Why, Dick's Wings. Daily lunch specials even a pirate could afford. Why, look, a table filled with flavors and tastes for even the most discriminating of pirates. A great lunch and a great time is always had by all at Dick's Wings, St. Augustine, Florida, US 1 South.
We begin this week in history on May 26, 1940. First successful helicopter flight in the U.S. Vought Sikorsky US-300 designed by Igor Sikorsky. May 27, 1692. William Phips, Governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, authorizes a special court of oyer and terminer to hear and determine, to administer Salem witch trials. May 28, 1830. U.S. President Andrew Jackson signs the Indian Removal Act, a key law leading to the forced removal of the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole tribes out of Georgia and surrounding states, setting the stage for the Cherokee Trail of Tears. May 29, 1765. Patrick Henry's historic speech against the Stamp Act, answering a cry of treason with, "If this be treason, make the most out of it." May 30th, 1883. Stampede, caused by a rumor that the Brooklyn Bridge was going to collapse, kills 12. May 31st, 1868. First Memorial Day parade held in Irontown, Ohio. And finally, on June 1st, 1944, Allied Generals Bernard Montgomery, George S. Patton, Omar Bradley, Miles Dempsey, and Harry Crerar meet in Portsmouth, England, just prior to D-Day. And that was This Week in History.
Very good, Davey. Some really good ones in there. And it is time for a shot across the bow, but it's going to be a very simple one today. Very simple. Many of you know that I'm a vet, and I have many friends that are vets. Davey's a vet. We understand certain things about all of our time in the military, but sometimes the people that are not attached to the military don't always understand. So I want to put it to you this way, and this is my only thing for shot across the bow. Memorial Day, ladies and gentlemen, is for all of us to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice and never came home. That's what Memorial Day is. And once in a while, I'll get messages from people on Facebook or in person, and they'll thank me for my service. And I have to correct them and tell them, I appreciate it, but today is the day that we honor those that never came home. If you want to thank me for my service and be right about it, that is what Veterans Day is all about. Veterans Day pays tribute to all of those who served. And then Armed Forces Day, which is also in the month of May, that is the day we honor all those who are currently serving. So we have 3 days of honor. We have a day to honor those currently serving. We have a day honoring those who are no longer serving. And we have a day to honor those who can no longer be brought home. And that if you keep those straight, most of the military friends I have, they don't get upset when you say that, but we do like to at least correct you and make you understand. Today is the day that we celebrate and or honor. The celebrate's not always a great word to use when you're talking about those that have passed. So honor is a better word. And so we use today to honor those that did not come home. And it doesn't matter what war it is, it goes all the way back. All 3 of these now do include, well, obviously, Armed Forces Day is only those that are serving. Memorial Day goes all the way back. We honor those from all the way back to the Civil War and beyond. Anybody that served duty in their country, for their country, who gave their lives for all of the rest of us to be able to enjoy what we have, this is the day to remember them on. So please, always make sure that you remember it that way so that you can give thanks properly. That's my shot across the bow for today. And on the horizon, well, we talk normally about some of the guests we got coming up. I'm still working on a really cool list of great guests we've got coming up. So I'm just going to keep it a secret for now. And that means we get to bring our guest on board.
No, not yet. Not yet.
What do you got, Davey?
I have another.
You have a Memorial Day thing? Oh, very good.
The final Monday in May is Memorial Day. It is a day to honor soldiers who died in war while serving in the United States military. Before it had the name we know today, Memorial Day was first known as Decoration Day. After the Civil War, people decorated soldiers' graves with flowers and flags so that they would not be forgotten. Civil War General John Logan issued an order. Decorating the graves was so important, he declared Decoration Day should be celebrated every spring. The first official Decoration Day took place at Arlington National Cemetery on May 30th, 1868. There, 5,000 people gathered to decorate the gravestones of 20,000 Union and Confederate Civil War soldiers. After World War II, Decoration Day became known as Memorial Day, and in 1971 became a federal holiday. Each Memorial Day at 3 p.m., citizens are asked to observe a national moment of remembrance, a time of silent reflection to pay tribute to those men and women who have died fighting for the freedoms that Americans enjoy. Today, many people still decorate graves of fallen soldiers. Some also have family gatherings and watch parades. Who do you honor on Memorial Day?
So speaking of who we honor, this is a small portion. If you can see it, this is a small urn. When my father passed away a couple of years back, his ashes were put in several of these small ones and passed out to the family. And this is my father. He sits on my desk for all my shows. So we honor him every day. But today is a special honor for him. He did 21 years in the United States Air Force. And as you can see, I'm not sitting here alone now. It is guest time. There's somebody sitting here. Hi. And this, my friends, is Stephen L. Sears. The best part about this whole thing more than anything else is he's been on the show before. He is a native of St. Augustine. The first time he was on the show, he was a stream in from LA or that foreign land. And this week he happens to be in town. So we welcome Steve to the show.
Thank you muchly.
Hi, and we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Look, you never even get flogged.
I will correct one thing, though.
What's that?
Not a native of St. Augustine.
Oh, that's right.
A military brat.
Yep.
We traveled all over every 3 years. And one of our stations was here in St. Augustine. I was halfway through the 3rd grade. So I was at RB Hunt because my dad was the Army liaison to the National Guard. And then from there, we transferred out over to Fort Knox, Kentucky. My dad did his Vietnam service. And when we retired, we just said, where do we want to go? And we had fallen in love with this little town. So we came back.
Everybody does. So when you came back, what grade of school were you in then?
I was halfway through 8th grade.
So you did 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th.
That's right.
And then went to FSU.
I went to U of F
U
first.
of F. Oh, okay.
Got my AA there. Did a short 1/4 stint at Florida Atlantic University. Then I went to Florida State. So I tell people I get to hate myself at least once a year.
So we know, Davey, put that one thing that you had back up there. We know that you had a hand in all of these things, TV shows. And the hint that I put out to everybody was that you had been involved in things that probably almost every one of the people that watch our show has been touched by, good or bad. I mean, Xena, Princess Warrior, A-Team, almost appropriate to talk about the A-Team on Memorial Day. But all these other shows that you have had a hand in.
Yeah, I have no idea how it happened. But yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate in many, many different ways. But I've worked on 2 shows at least that have become a part of our pop culture. One is the A-Team and the other is Xena.
Yes.
But in between, I would say that I did from A to Xena. But in between there, the shows I worked on, some of them you saw there. My first show was called Riptide. I was Stephen J. Cannell Productions. And I did A-Team, Hardcastle McCormick, Stingray, J.J. Starbuck, Highwayman. We talked about Sam Jones. Sam's an awesome guy. I worked on that show. What were my other shows? Superboy, Swamp Thing, Jesse Hawks, Walker, Texas Ranger, and then Xena, and then Sheena from the comic book. Yeah, and I never intended for this to happen.
And we should clarify, because some people, if they caught our first show that you were in, which was, I think, 2 years ago now.
Was it? Wow.
I think it's been 2 years. You weren't an actor in these shows.
No. I was a writer.
You were a writer and producer for these shows.
Right.
So you had a hand in the direction of what these shows were going, or
Yes.
at least some hand in it.
Yeah.
So you could control and direct the direction of the show. And so I can say this, your direction made these shows popular and enjoyable to everybody.
I appreciate that. I'm going to jump in and say that, as most people know about the film and television business and production, it's a collaborative thing.
It is.
And I have worked with many incredible people, and they make me look great. So when I've produced shows, especially, it is the crew, it is the actors, it is the directors, it's the people that you bring in and get involved with.
The people holding the grips, the lights,
people who are moving everything. And I do a whole lecture on where creativity comes from. It's another side thing. But one thing I point out is I say, look, if you're working on production and you're moving cables, you are a creative person because you are contributing to this. And when you see people working on the set who take a pride in what they're doing, you know you're going to have a fantastic show.
And it's very important to understand that and as we talked about pre-show, because you're a member of the Magic Castle. I've been to the Magic Castle. I was a performing magician for way longer than I want to say. But when I did stage shows, the magician is just the guy in the front, without the girls, without the sound guys, without the lighting guys. Lighting is magic shows are probably the most important and most technologically difficult to do, lighting wise, because if you don't do the right lights, they're going to see everything.
Yeah.
And so without those people, you don't have a good magic show. Without those people, you don't have a good show.
Yeah.
And they come out every day, every week, and they're part of what you do. So did you, when you were doing this, now, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to do our numbers in just a few minutes. And normally we would say, the show's done. If you want to watch us, you get to come back into a second show. But Davey and I decided with this guest here, who has been on our show already once before, that this would be a lot more fun just to not worry about it for now and let everybody enjoy this show. So we're not going to break away at this time. So in a few minutes, we'll do some of the ending of the show, so that we don't wait till the end. And then we're just going to sit here and have a chat, because I've got questions for you. For example, were you ever labeled as executive producer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So as executive producer and the writer of these shows, did you have any input or say into the actors that were brought into the shows?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. An executive producer, it's one of the biggest questions in the business is, what does a producer do? And there's like line producer, there's writer producer, supervising producer, co-exec producer, exec producer, and then there's what's called a showrunner. Many times a showrunner is an executive producer. Every show is different. There's a different type of responsibilities for each particular level. In every show that I've had where I had a producer title, I worked the title above it because I was learning. I wanted to learn what the next stage was. Now, an executive producer, in its purest form, for me, is the person that protects all your crew and your actors in your production from the network and the studios, because they have their particular way they want to see things done. And they're not wrong, because they have to make money off of these things.
Well, they're the ones putting some of the money out.
Absolutely.
So they have to have a say.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I worked with some great executives, but they have a lot of input, and I have to interpret it and then shift it into the creative aspect of the show. So it's the person who is the most responsible for what's going on. But at the same time, when you're hiring these people, when you're hiring actors, directors, the crew, you're still looking for that little bit of spark. And the weird thing is that you want them to do the stuff that you want them to do, but you want them to do it. You don't want to marionette them. You don't want to turn them into puppets.
Right.
Especially with actors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When I'm dealing with actors, and even when I'm like writing a script, and everything in there is exactly, I hear the voices in my head, the actors are there, it's all in my head. It will almost never be the way it is in my head. But when you're working with really good actors, and by that I mean people who love what they're doing, as writers, we refer to this as giving us little treasures. And right now you're looking at a picture of me with Renee O'Connor. I love Renee. We're friends to this day. We have done so many projects together. And Renee was the co-star of Xena, where
yes,
she played Gabrielle. I'm actually in her Shakespearean theater company.
Oh, really?
I've done 3 Shakespearean plays as an actor in those with Renee, because she talked me out of, she said, I want you to be an actor again. I'm like, really? Are you kidding? After 30-something years? So I've actually done 5 different projects with her. As a sidebar, one of them was Matilda, and I played Miss Trunchbull. So yes, I was in drag for the entire thing and singing. It was awesome.
Did you have fun?
Oh God,
yeah,
so much fun.
I might have to twist your arm and see if you can't get her to be a guest on my show.
Well, I'll talk to her.
I'd love to.
Right now, she's traveling around the world doing appearances.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she is an incredible person. I mean, just as a person, but she's a great example of what I was going to refer to is we get little treasures. The writers refer to this when the actors show them something that came out of the writing, but they bring something else to it. We call it little treasures. And I have worked on shows where sometimes you have a difficult actor. And what happens is you spend your entire month working on a story and you write out the script. And sometimes you come in over the weekend and you just bleed all over your keyboard and you get it out there. And then when it gets to the set, you have an actor who just says, I know how to do this. And so they change everything. And what happens is that the writer then goes, why did I do all this? So the next time they write, they say, I'm just going to put my effort into it. And that's a downward spiral.
Yes.
I've been fortunate on many of my shows, and Xena is a great example, Renee is a great example of this, where when I wrote the first script I had written for Xena, goes off to the set, I'm watching the dailies as I come back, and I'm like, wait a minute, wow, they're challenging me. They're bringing something to this that I didn't. Okay, fine. All right, game on. And so I'm like, I'm upping my game here. And every time I did that, they gave me something special. And it was that upward spiral. They were looking forward to what we were writing. And we were looking forward to seeing what they did with it.
So it was a good way to look at it is they're taking the script and honoring what you have in the script and adding their personality to it. And that's important. Yeah.
So whenever I talk to an actor and we talk about the characters and what I want to do, I have had actors who like, there's a line that they're kind of missing. And they'll say, well, give me a reading. And I say, I don't do that. I'm not going to tell you how I would do it. I said, but let's discuss it as if you're the character. Let's just talk about this and we will talk it out. Another great actor I worked with was John Allen Nelson. And John had been on Baywatch, but he was also on another series I think it was called Vanished. But he was the co-star on Sheena. And this is kind of a funny story. I had not worked with John before. I just knew him through the casting process. I co-created the series with Doug Schwartz, who had one of the creators of Baywatch. And we were both exec producers. But I only knew John through the auditions. So we were shooting a teaser pilot that the studio was going to take out to sell to the local stations. Okay. It was one of the last actual syndicated shows. So I go to the set, and one of the ADs comes up to me and says, Mr. Sears, Mr. Allen, Mr. Nelson would like to talk to you about a line that's in the script. And this was aside from the entire pilot script I had written with Doug. And so I'm going like, we haven't even started the show and it's already begun. So I go down to the set and I go over, hi, John, how you doing? We say, and I said, okay, I understand you have a problem with a line. And he goes, yeah, it's this line here. And he points it out on the page. And keep in mind, we're shooting sides. We're not shooting the whole pilot, just scenes. And my diplomatic way of addressing this is I go, well, what do you think it should say? That's my diplomatic way. And I said that. I said, well, what do you think it should say? And he looks at me and goes, no, don't change it. But I don't have the entire script. Can you talk to me about the character, the depth of the character and the layers? I literally looked at him and I went, oh my God, you're an actor. And he was the best to work with because it was that back and forth. I love that. It was one of the most magical things about working in film and television, but it's the same thing when you have the right company. Yeah, there's Sheena. Gina Lee Nolan was our star. But even if you're working in a corporation or you're doing a day-to-day, any job, if you feel that magic with the people you're working with, it's cliche, but it's not work.
No, it isn't. It isn't work. That's one of the reasons why, and I always brag about Davey and Mandy, and this is a perfect opportunity for me to do it once more. This show is not work. At least for me, it's not. And Davey, it's not work for you either, is it?
No, not really.
It really, it's a lot of fun. We have fun. You do put in a lot of hours on the Sunday and Monday leading up to the show. You do a lot. And I do a whole, not as much as you, but I do a whole lot trying to make contacts and everything else, but it's a collaborative effort. And Mandy, with what she does out from Utah, if it wasn't for the three of us working together, we wouldn't have this at all. Yeah. I definitely wouldn't have it if it wasn't for Mandy and Davey, because I'm just a pretty face and that doesn't always work. So here's a question for you. Uh-oh. And I'm going to base it on the fact that I do an acting class here.
Oh.
I do an acting class in St. Augustine, and it's mostly for it primarily really is for the tour guides.
Okay.
Okay.
Which I was a tour guide.
And tour guide, being a tour guide is acting. It really is.
Huge
If you're a good
performance.
one.
Mhm.
So one of the parts, and my entire acting class is based on my 50 plus years of being in the entertainment world. And I spend probably a good portion of the acting class talking about my failures. And it's almost like a comedy club routine. And I'm talking about some of the stupid things I've done or the things that I thought and whatever else. But one of the things I do tell everybody, and so here's a chance for me to find out if maybe I should change what I'm telling everybody. First impressions are extremely important in the entertainment world. Extremely important. And in many cases, when you've got several actors that are going to vie for the part that you want this to be filled by, you've made portion of your decision based on their headshot and their resume without ever meeting them.
Mhm.
Your final decision comes from when you meet them. And sometimes that decision will automatically happen within the first 30 to 60 seconds of them walking in for the set.
Okay. Yeah.
Is this true?
Yes, with some provisions, but in general, that's true. When I look at, we have a casting call, I look at the picture and resume. I look at the picture to see, is that a look? And it doesn't have to be like, oh my God, it's got to be a fantastic look. I'm just saying, does that fit the character mold or within there? And when I describe my characters, I try to be very, very broad in my descriptions. I don't want to nail it down necessarily to a particular racial ethnicity. I don't want to narrow it down to a particular darkness or lightness or, evil look. I'm looking for the character, but is there something there? When I flip it over on the resume, I can scan what their credits are. What I actually look at is down at the bottom when they write little special skills and things about them and education. Because what I'm really trying to find out is, what are you as a person? That's going to come across. And quite honestly, in television, it also tells me how you're going to be on the set.
True.
Now,
Very true.
one of the things that I will do is, because I did go to U of F, FAU, and Florida State, if there is any Florida school down there, we have something to talk about. Even if it's Miami, we talk about games. We have something. And a quick sidebar short story on this. When I was casting in one of the episodes for Sheena, as you might notice, I of course have my Florida State thing here. But I used to be covered with Florida State. My hat would be Florida State. One of my fedoras says Florida State, belt buckle, everything. In fact, I found out later that some members of the crew were making bets on how many Florida State logos I had when I came out of the set. So anyway, I'm sitting there with our director for this episode and one of the other producers, and I look at the back of the resume, and it says, this guy was on the U of F 1996 U of F championship team. Now, I spent the most money I've ever spent on a game to go and see them kick our butts in Florida State. But it was a great game, but they definitely kicked our butts. And so I'm looking at this, and I turn to the director, and I go, this will be interesting. Because I'm covered with Florida State stuff. And when this guy comes in, normally when actors come in, if they're, they walk in with a lot of confidence, and then they stand there and they will say, hi there, my name is such and such, and I'm here for the role. Very, very popular. And this guy comes in and he is very confident. He stops and looks at me and goes, oh, crap. Except he didn't say crap. And we laughed. And, we talked about it. And I told him about the tickets and everything. And he said, well, sorry, not sorry. And so we did his audition, and he was great. And we got along. And then afterwards, the real funny thing, I hired him because of his ability and because of his personality. I knew he'd be a good fit for our set. So the funny thing is, when we were doing, I get the dailies back from what they were shooting the day, they sent me the tape of the prints. And before they start the actual shot, you'll hear, it's like you'll hear, okay, the camera starts running, and you see the actors usually they're shaking themselves in, and you hear somebody say sound, and they'll say, okay, ready, action. Then they start the scene. But the front of it, you actually see the actors getting in. What this guy would do in every other take is he would go, and then he would point to the camera because he knew I was watching.
So he had a sense of humor.
He did. But it was like he was easygoing and talented. Now, that first 30 seconds you're talking about, yes, when somebody walks in a room, we all do it. We all look at them and we instantly kind of assess their aura. But it's how they handle it after that. When I go in on the other side, when I go into like studios, executive offices where I'm pitching new series or new ideas, Zoom kind of ruined this for me, but I can still kind of do it with Zoom. But physically going to office, the first thing I do is I look around their office, because everybody who has an office, you bring little things from home so you feel comfortable. I look at those and I start to assess who I'm talking to. I can start to read them.
Do you know what that's kind of called in the magic world? Called cold reading.
Yeah. And for me, this came out of improv.
Yeah.
When I was working as an actor back when I was at Florida State and St. Augustine High School, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what it was. And you mentioned the tour guide thing. When I was a tour guide, I did the exact same thing. It was just a very intuitive thing for me. I would assess my group, and then I would play to them, and I would give the history, but I would give it in such a way that it sounded like even I was surprised about this.
I do this too with the tours in the Pirate Museum. In fact, sometime this summer, I'm going to hit the number 10,000 of tours in the Pirate Museum.
Wow.
That's a lot of tours.
Oh,
But I will look at people. I will size them up. I will ask them where they're from. You might see a shirt they're wearing, and it gives you some clues. But the reason, more so than anything else, for example, I had a family, 6 people in the family, and they were Cuban. And we talked about the Spanish, more of the Spanish influence on St. Augustine with the pirates here. And in fact, they were the only ones on my tour at this point in time, so it was more of a personal tour. But everything that when I find out where you're from or what your job is, then I try to figure out ways that I can bring the pirate history into something that is part of what you already know because of your job or your life. And it makes a big difference in the fact that your tour now has become more valuable to them.
Right. They're identifying with it. In writing, you do this with slight nuances that don't seem like they're important as far as the script plot, but and I've taught this. What you're trying to do is get the viewer invested in it, because once they feel like they are invested in this, they will follow your heroes anywhere.
Right.
You have to give them those little things that they can identify with. Now, by the way, and when I do that whole thing where I say, I assess somebody, okay, this is kind of an important thing. I never come to it from a negative direction. I don't assess them in a negative light, ever. And my philosophy is you have to prove to me you're a jerk. I'm going to assume that I'm going to learn just as much from you as you're going to learn from me.
So the door is open.
Absolutely.
And they're the ones that can.
I don't close other people's doors. I was so fortunate in how I got into the business and how I moved up to the business. I think everybody deserves that type of consideration. And I honestly think that everybody is really capable of it if they don't get in their own way. That's the biggest problem with
that is it, and we can use that little 3-letter word called ego. And I mean, I do argue with people because I have people that, and I'm using myself as an example. I have people that believe that I have an ego that is just way too much to deal with. And I will tell them I do have an ego. But if I didn't have an ego, I couldn't do any of this. Well,
the way I look at that, and knowing you now, especially now that we have gone face to face, you have a confidence. And it's a careful distinction because I've had to make this distinction myself. I tell people, don't mistake my willingness to interact and being friendly and everything to a lack of confidence, because when it's needed, you will realize that I absolutely have it.
Right.
It's not ego. In fact, one of my little t-shirt sayings on the other side of this is arrogance is no substitute for talent.
No, not at all.
So that is false ego, is arrogance.
Now, this may be a dangerous question to ask you, because
It was not me.
yeah, that was Matt.
Yeah, believe me, I did not have that food this morning.
And you don't have to answer this question at all because it could be. Let me just ask it.
This sounds good.
Do you have any actors that you would be willing to say these people were people I just they were not worth working with, for lack of a better way to put it.
I don't have any experience that I can say it wasn't worth it. I've had too much fun and enjoyment and fulfillment on this. Now, as far as individuals, yes, there are some actors that were just a pain in the butt. I will say this, many times when an actor is popular, they're working on a TV show, they're a lead perhaps, and I tell this to people that when you get into this business, at one point in your career, you're going to be a jerk. How quickly you recover determines whether you work again.
That's true.
And I have had a few people who became that because basically everybody was saying yes to them.
Yes.
You know, the manager was saying, you're better than this. You know, the agents were saying, oh, we can get you more. And all this kind of stuff. We pick managers and agents. It can be anybody. And they get really cocky about it.
Yeah.
And then they don't work again. Or they have a problem working.
Right.
And I will say that, I'm not going to give any names.
Yeah, and I that's why I was hesitating on asking the question. So we don't have to have any names.
Well, I will say that 2 actors I worked with were difficult. And then, but he's not. He's great. He's right on cue.
I told you.
That's 2 of these
the hazards of having a basset hound that has his own mindset.
very
Yeah.
cute dog.
Yeah.
So with these actors though, they kind of dropped off a little bit. And then in separate instances, I ran into one and I ran into the other. We went out, we chatted and we went out to lunch. And one of them had gone on to actually become a writer and I think also a producer. And he mentioned somebody he'd worked with. And I said, oh, you went through that experience. He goes, yeah, I was working with somebody who was very difficult. And then he turned to me and he goes, was I like that? And I said, yeah, you kind of were. And he goes, yeah, because I know. And I was like, yeah, okay, you caught it.
So you have a realization and it improves your personality and your ability.
It does. You have to look at yourself and just not get too high on yourself. One of the jobs I had when I was a struggling actor was I worked at an answering service, which meant back then it was a PBX board. So, literally this 1980s. And I've got the midnight shift and I'm plugging in things. And a lot of celebrities were on this service. And so somebody would call in and I would say, hold on a second. And I would then cross connect to the celebrity. And I say, this person is holding. Do you want to talk to them? And they would say, maybe they'd say no. And I would say, okay. And I go back, well, I can't reach them. Could you leave a message? So literally, that was my job. And there were, like I said, celebrities and actors. And one of them on there was just extremely rude. I was always very friendly. I was like, hi there, A1 Steve, can I help you? It's called A1. And most of the time, the celebrities were kind of like, hi, Steve, how you doing? Have I got any messages? This guy was always like, just, okay, put it out, man. Just give me the messages. And I'm like, okay. So that was fine. Many years later, I'm developing a series, and I'm at dinner, and it's a big party.
Max, come on, that's enough.
He tells the story differently.
Yeah, he does.
So I'm at this dinner, and this is a big studio push. So this is like this is a big party, and I'm sitting across from this guy, and I'm thinking,
does he know who you are? No, okay.
He knows that I'm I'm the developer, the creator, and the exec producer of something that's coming up. And I'm thinking, do I tell him? Should I tell him? I don't know. And then at one point, he turns to me and says, Steve, he goes, for your new series, you should have a regular villain. And he starts describing what this villain should be like. And of course, all the executives are standing around there, president of the studio. And I listened to him for a moment. I went, oh my gosh, do you realize you're describing yourself? And he kind of snickers. And he just goes, oh, well, yeah, I kind of thought that maybe I would be a good fit for this. And I said, well, I'll think about it. Didn't tell him. Many years after that, I did run into him at a convention, and I finally did tell him. And he, interestingly enough, he said the same thing that the other actor did. He said, was I a pain in the butt? And I said, yeah, you weren't the nicest guy. And he said, look, I'm sorry. That was a tough time for me. I was going through all sorts of issues at home. And I went, all right, fine. We have no. So
Yep.
it happens.
It does happen. I mean, you run into all these people, and some of these actors, and I encompass females into it too because they all want to be actors. Now.
Actor to me is
I don't-
non-gender.
Yeah, it's non-gender. Some of them come from very humble beginnings or backgrounds, and then all of a sudden they're thrust into something that their talent put them into, and they're not suited to handle it properly.
Well, consider this. You know the imposter phenomenon.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know, it means that suddenly you have something happening that's great in your life, but it can't be real. You're going to be found out. You're a fraud. Any moment you're going to be exposed and you're going to go right back down to the bottom. So I went through that heavy the first 2 years of my career. I still go through it today. Now, with actors, and it could be any celebrity in the business, suddenly they have this success, okay? People are acknowledging you are incredibly talented. Look, all the people who love you, and we love you, and everybody loves you. And many people love you because you're making money for them, but they love you, they love you, they love you. Here's the dilemma of the actor, and those of you who are actors, you know this. The dilemma is this. We don't know why we have that ability. People can teach you the mechanical aspects of the craft, but you are either creative, you are either there, or you're not. The best that anybody can do is really teach you how to release it. So you don't know how it ever happened. And so there you are, everything's working. The moment the show stops, the moment you can't get a job, and the moment people stop saying how wonderful you are, you desperately try to figure out, how do I fix this? But you don't know how you built it.
Right.
So you are terrified at that moment. And by the way, that's why I tell a lot of aspiring actors or directors or writers, anybody, I said, this is not a moral thing. I say, if you have any vices right now, you have a drug use or anything like that, do not assume, oh, I'll stop it when I become famous. That won't happen. What will happen is when this dip happens in your life, and it will, you are going to say, how do I fix this? I have to go back to what I was like then, and you're going to replicate everything, including the bad habits.
Oh, yeah. So when I teach this acting class, and it's not really an acting class, it kind of is, but it's more of a trying to give tour guides and pirates and reenactors some kind of a basic foundation that they can build themselves on. Creating a character, figuring out a name to your character, the proper way to take photos, the proper time to tell as a pirate, the proper time to tell what kind of a joke is proper for the kind of people. Because I could sit here and tell pirate jokes that are adult, but you can't tell the same jokes if you're surrounded by a bunch of children that like so. And we have people, and I'm sure there's actors like this too. But we have pirates, we have tour guides that don't understand. You have to know your audience. This comes from the improv side of it, and you've done that. So you have to know your audience, and that's very important. But we have people that they don't know, and when they and here's the worst part. I have to remember sometimes, because when I've been downtown, I've started to say something and then realize I'm not dressed as a pirate. I probably shouldn't say that. So you have to know the appropriate time frame and everything. And that's basically what I'm sharing and teaching.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
I get to ask you. Since you teach this, and just listening to how you teach this, and how you express it, when you're dealing with tour guides, for example, let me see if I can best articulate this. That's one of the things about teaching creativity is you often stop and say, how can I articulate what's in my head to you? This is the best way I can say it. Do you encourage them to find their audience eye? And by that, it's something I did have. I have often said, I feel like I'm living my life as if the camera is watching me. What I realized later on is that there is a part of me that goes outside and it becomes part of my audience to watch me And it's a weird thing, by doing that, if I understand the audience I'm in front of, the group I'm in front of, I kind of am acting as one of them to be part of their perspective. So when I start to make a joke, or when I start to play the room, there's that little audience in me that is kind of going, or, oh yeah. Now, every actor who's done stage work, the best way I can describe that is when you walk on the stage, you really can't see the audience. They're all in darkness. When I started out, I was so nearsighted, they were just blobs. But every actor will tell you they feel the audience. And I said, that is kind of their stage eye going out there and joining them.
I could relate to that because that comes from working comedy clubs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be really important.
Because, and it's one of the reasons why in most comedy clubs, you go to any comedy club, there is an opener, there is a middle, and there's a headline. And the headline is hoping that the opener will bring the crowd into the right vibe so that when you walk out as the headliner, they're already in a mood that they want to have fun. So I think it's the same thing.
You're very close.
You have to know your audience, but you also have to get the feeling of the room, and then as a tour guide, the feeling of the location or whatever. I think bringing the people that are on my tour into the tour. I don't know why this example popped into my head, but I'll use it and see if it may fit. There are some occasions where I'm going to tell a joke, but I'm going to also say, some of you are not going to get this joke. and it's for no other reason than it's a time thing. And one of the big jokes that I do a lot now is, because I have people that come and go, you know so much about pirate history in the Pirate Museum. And I said, yeah. And I could do a 3-hour tour, but nobody goes on a 3-hour tour anymore. Now, those people that are in the know, they know the joke, but I've already warned you that it's probably, so I'll get blank stares. But the ones that are laughing, so then when I get the blank stares, I'll say, by the way, is there anybody on this tour named Marianne or Ginger? And so they'll get laughter again, and some of the blank stares will then go, oh, I know what he's talking about. So you read your audience, but you guide them.
You can gauge them and guide them.
You can gauge them and guide them. And it's very important.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. That's a great way to kind of, it's a ripple way of assessing where your audience is.
It is.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Because when I'm doing tours, I have people that are my age all the way down to 4, 5, and 6. The kids under 20, and I say kids, the kids under 25 usually don't get the 3-hour reference, but the people over 30 usually do. And sometimes it baffles me because if nobody understands the joke, it's a reference to Gilligan's Island. And if nobody has seen, anybody that hasn't seen Gilligan's Island is probably living under a rock because it's syndicated everywhere. So when you did Xena Princess Warrior, and I think he's a great actor, but I'm going to ask, Kevin Sorbo did some appearances in Xena because she did some appearances in Hercules. Did you have anything to do with Hercules?
No.
But was Kevin Sorbo, because I think he's a great actor and I like what he does. Is he as, the real silly word that sits, is he as magnanimous in real life as he appears to be when he does his performances, his characters? He seems to be a kind of a down to earth kind of a guy.
Well, Kevin's very controversial now because of his stances. I will say this about Kevin, and I've told him this. If Kevin has a good script and a strong director, he's amazing. He really is, and he's fun to watch. Every time I have been there and witnessed, like when a Xena fan would come up and say, oh, thank you for launching Xena, or talk about that. Very nice. He's just wonderful with them. And I always say, look, without Hercules, there would be no Xena. That was our big brother. I always give credit to that. Working with him, I don't know. I didn't work directly with him.
Now, Lucy Lawless was probably the most perfect Xena could have ever been.
Yeah, she was.
I mean, were there other actors that?
Oh yeah, she was not originally Xena. That was not the original casting.
Yeah, who was?
Vanessa Angel. Vanessa Angel is a wonderful actress, and she had a series for a short time called Weird Science, based off the
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
And what happened with that was Vanessa was signed up to play Xena in the episodes that were on Hercules. And at that time, there was no intention of a spinoff series. And apparently, I think she was in England at the time, and she developed either a sinus infection or something and couldn't fly to New Zealand. So Rob Tappert called Lucy, and Lucy had done at least 1 or 2 episodes of Hercules before as a different character. And he said, "Can you come out here and do this?" And she actually said no, because she was on a camping trip at the time. They have a completely different attitude in New Zealand, which is actually awesome, the way they regard acting. It is a job. It is like not just, it's actually a legitimate job. And so he talked her into it. And so she came out and did it. And of course, just like history was made. Now, I ran into Vanessa at one of the Xena conventions. And we were back in the green room, and she was there. She was going to be kind of a surprise guest. I was going to be brought out by Claire Stansfield. And I just asked her about it. I said, basically I said, how did that feel? Because that sounds trite. I just said, it's got to be weird. And she was wonderful. She said that, yes, that bothered her, that she missed that opportunity. And it bothered her for a while. And then she said, but I watched the series and I realized that was the right thing. There was a greater force here because there was no one else for that role but Lucy.
So many spin-offs from all kinds of shows happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think Xena Princess Warrior became a stronger show than Hercules.
I'm biased.
Yeah.
It did and it didn't. We kind of became 2 separate shows, obviously.
Right.
And one of the things, and I've always said this about trying to do Hercules, as an actor, as a writer, as a director on my show, the producers, the character Hercules, excuse me for coughing.
That's all right.
My surgery that I have here. The character Hercules was a good, noble demigod. He was good. And so, when your lead character is good, and is pure, it's a more difficult character to write.
Why?
Because where do you find the flaws?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what you need for a character. What is the character fighting with inside of themselves? What do they regret? So with Xena, however, Xena portrayed in Hercules, she was the destroyer of nations. She killed people. She laid waste. She came from a dark area.
Right.
So we had all of this richness that we could start working with her character. So, oh God, what was the original question? The popularity. So what happened was, after a while, as Xena we explored more of that. We shared a lot of stuff back and forth. Same production company, same sets, basically the same crew. We didn't necessarily share producers or staff writers, but we did have writers go back and forth. And what happened is, and I thought this was a great choice, Hercules started to become a little more, I don't want to say darker because that sounds evil, but more introspective. And I think it evolved.
It did.
It became a good show. It became a good show. It was a good show because God had so much success. But then it was kind of like, well, now I think we understand this character more. They did episodes where there was, Sophie's choices. You only have 2 choices. Both of them are bad. What do? And how does somebody who comes from this sense of goodness deal with that? So it's arguable back and forth to say which show became better. We became more part of the pop culture.
Yeah.
Yes, because we certainly had different identifiability. We had the LGBTQ community. We had the empowerment community for women. And we loved it and we welcomed it and we told these great stories. And I remember somebody asking us once when we started out, did we know we were going to have all this effect? And I said, honestly, when we started out, we were just hoping for a second season. We wanted to have fun. And everybody was of the like mind, and it was like lightning in a bottle, just all came together.
So you mentioned the LGBTQ community.
Mhm.
So I'll ask it this way. You didn't write the show for that purpose, though, did you?
You know, that's a question we always get. When we started the series, keep in mind, I had worked on so many shows and series beforehand. And I come out of theater. And one of the things that I made a comment, we were having a meeting, and I made a comment, I said, we will have a very large, I said, we will have a following in the LGBT community. And the reason I said that, and you know, people kind of nodded, some people said, oh, why would you think that? And I said, in every series I've done where there have been same gender leads, I have read either the fan fiction or the fan magazines where they write letters. And there they are. And I said, this is because it's a disenfranchised community and they are really looking for something that they can identify with, something to validate and identify with who they are. And when they see it, they grab it. And I said, we have two women traveling through this land, and the story is going to naturally evolve that they become close friends because they weren't at the beginning.
Right.
And I said, we're going to have this. Now, I didn't expect how big it was going to be. But we basically wrote a natural, evolving relationship.
So it wasn't, the writing was not directly on purpose. It was evolving.
Oh, we leaned into it later because we realized, you know something? People are feeling good about this. But the cool thing about it is that we have a large Xena community that obviously believes the LGBTQ context. We also have a large community that believes that it was strictly a friendship, okay? We never forced anybody into either area. And one of the things that we did, only because it was not in this world, is we never put a label on it. We never said the words either gay or lesbian. We didn't have to. I mean, the way I pointed out is that in this world they lived in, nobody cared. We had a woman give birth to a centaur and nobody batted an eye. So it didn't matter.
So here's, I'll throw this in, and it's pirate history, and I'll throw this in. I also believe that prior to, and I'll pick a year, and I may be off on the year, but prior to 1800, we'll use 1800, certain aspects of community life were not viewed in certain areas of disdain as they are viewed now.
Yeah.
And here's an example. And I love doing this once in a while. Pirates on board a ship could be married. Did you know that?
I actually, I'm going to say a dirty word here. Dirty. In my readings of privateers, yes, I have run across something like this.
Now, it was a union. It wasn't necessarily.
I would say privateers because there was the discussion of the legal sanction of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Go right ahead.
So they were union, and it was really for a monetary situation more than anything else. And since we're sitting here, I'll use us as an example. We've traveled around. We've bounced from crew to crew, and we're in this crew, and we have the captain union us. It's for the purpose that if something happens to you, I get your shares and your money, and if something happens to me, the other way around. It basically really was an insurance policy. But when you bring that up in the modern day world, I get so many, especially guys. Oh no, that never happened. Well, it did happen because the phobias that we have now, and almost all phobias are learned. I mean, my phobia of snakes and spiders, I don't think is learned. It's just that I don't like them.
Yes.
But phobias are learned, like racism is learned. It is not. We're not born with those things, and it happens based on where our lives are. So I never saw it as. I'm a huge fan of Xena Princess Warrior. Lucy Lawless is like You know, she even to this day, I've seen pictures of her even to this day. She's still a gorgeous
I
woman.
know. I know.
And I saw her when she was in
Age, damn it, age.
yeah, when she was in Ben Hur. Was it Ben? Not Ben Hur. It
that
was
was in,
Spartacus. Spartacus. I watched her
a
in
lot of it in
Spartacus,
Spartacus.
and an awful lot of her in Spartacus. So I mean, so I think where I'm going with this,
Mhm.
and you can correct me, I think the shows that don't purposely push
Mhm.
a direction,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say any direction,
Mhm.
doesn't matter what it is, but
Right.
shows that don't push a political agenda or a societal agenda, those shows become popular by everybody.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think Xena Princess Warrior was probably
Mhm.
in that direction because of the way it was written.
I agree. A lot of and we weren't the first to do that. Obviously, the original Star Trek dealt with everything from the Vietnam War to race issues, and they
Yes.
did it in a science fiction format.
But they didn't throw it in your face.
Well, that was the thing. And with us, we all agreed on how we were going to be doing this, and we realized as these two characters became closer together. They fought together, they did domestic duties together, they died for each other, and they stayed with each other. They traveled the known world at that time. And we realized we don't have to say anything about this.
No.
And I will say that for me, I can't speak for everybody else, but we were all pretty much in sync because obviously everything flowed together. As I was writing the characters, we got to a certain point, and I was just like, well, yeah, of course. However you want to define this, they have a bond that no one can tear asunder. And that's a bond that if you look at your mate and say, I have that bond with you, it's the same. If you look at your best friend and say it, and you feel that way, then it's the same.
Here's another way I could relate to it.
Mhm.
I did 16 years in the military. I have several friends that have done as much, if not more. And all of us in our time frame of the military were involved in some pretty violent world situations.
Right.
You become really close to those people that you're involved in that with.
Yeah.
It just naturally happens. Race is gone,
Mm-hmm.
gender is gone, and so will this story, and I'm sorry, I'm paying so much attention to what we're doing here. Davey, we'll take this question here, and then I tell you what we'll do. Let's do the video for the thank you, and while that thank you video is going on, we can replenish a couple of drinks here real quick. But let's do this. I always wondered why in Xena did later seasons shift to more stories with Judaism, Christian theology aspect.
Because of a natural progression of the world, the cultures, and we were not doing a history show, but we were doing mirrors of it. I mean, we did one episode that was dealt with, fighting in Troy. Then, like the next week, Caesar shows up. I was like, okay, we were kind of staying in our alternate universe. But what we wanted to explore was the human condition, and as a natural part of our human condition, it's how do people react to certain theologies, and we did everything from, we did do references to Judaism, we did references to Christian theologies, various forms, Hinduism. We had our characters explore them. And one of the reasons for this is that we kind of like said, hey, come on, join us, don't hate, just kind of let's see what happens here. And let's see where we can go. And in some of the cases, we played the darker side that religions sometimes, I shouldn't say religions, but darker side that some people take advantage of in a belief.
Right.
And then how that is combated by people who have a pure level of belief. One of our characters, Eli, that Tim Amundsen played just brilliantly. It was funny because people were asking, are you doing an allusion to Jesus? And I said, you could say John the Baptist if you want to, because the influence is there and he's a good person. So are you following the message that's coming out there about the pureness of the spirit? Because that's what it's about.
Very good. That was a good question. And by the way, Will, the historian, is he's my son, actually. He's a history teacher in northern Alabama.
I love, as you may have figured out, I love history.
And that was really a great question.
Yeah.
So, Davey, why don't we we need to do a quick glass here. Put up our thank you. Let's do our thank yous and get them out of the way, and then we'll come back because I'm going to ask about Bruce Campbell.
Ah, the chin.
Yeah. What's that?
The chin.
The chin.
The
I'm
chin.
going to ask about Bruce Campbell. So, can you go ahead and do that, Davey?
Okay, it's time for the answer to the joke of the week. What is a pirate's favorite non-alcoholic drink? The answer is the high C. I know Mandy Joe is drinking to that joke.
Over there on the rocking chair, I think. All right. Very good, Davey. The high C.
No, he's not.
I don't like high C. I like rum. But on that note,
The Captain's Quarters podcast is always searching the world for history, knowledge, and adventure. It takes a crew to run a podcast, so we would like to take this opportunity to thank those who help keep the podcast going.
The crew: Captain William Mayhem, Navigator Davey Longwood, Cartographer Mandy Joe. Our charities we support: Agla's Acres, St. Augustine Humane Society, and Inc. Investing in Kids. The three major charities for support, but always room for more. You too can be part of the crew and support the show in many ways. Go to our Patreon. For a small monthly contribution, become a powder monkey, first mate, or captain sponsor. Go to YouTube and hit the like and subscribe buttons to join our ranks and support the show. It does take a crew. Thank you.
Good job, Davey, as always. Put up our banner real quick. So, see, you must be a mind reader. There are all the different ways you can watch and follow us, ladies and gentlemen. YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, Spotify. Or if you just want to listen to us because you don't want to look at my face, and I'm okay with that, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, Spotify, iHeart, Music, Amazon, Twitter, and Stitcher. And you see Spotify on there twice, so you can either watch us or listen to us. And I keep telling everybody, I'm going to give Joe Rogan a run for his money. Probably never happened, but that's okay too. So, good job, Davey. I think that takes care of everything, and we're going to bring our guest back onto the set right now. Oh, what is that? Oh, wait, you're right. We should be talking about that real quick. Real quick, ladies and gentlemen, we were at the performance of Peter Pan this past weekend. Every year I get invited to bring some of my pirates to Peter Pan. It is the Zoika dance, but it is like the St. Augustine Ballet. And there are children there from 4 years old up to 19, and they all do ballet. And it is just a wonderful performance. It's so fun to giggle and watch the little ones. There was Melinda. There's Leon and Jean and Steve, all part of our crew. There's Melinda in the middle right there, and Tony and Rachel and Kara, and I don't know who the other woman is. She's not pirate here, so I don't know. But we go every year, and one of the biggest reasons we go, and I have a few people that say, well, we've seen it. It's different every year. And the biggest reason we go is to support, because as a performer and actor, you understand this, I'm sure. There's nothing worse than being on stage and the curtain goes up and you have a theater of 1,000 seats and there's 400 people in it. You can feel the vibe. Mm-hmm. So it's very important. Yeah. So we go every year and we support, and we go dressed in our gear. And I did Captain Hook for them in 2016 and
What a
17.
surprise.
Yes. Now I did not wear a tutu. It would have been a 4-4 on me. That would have been terrible. But we, I was hooked for. It was only supposed to be 1 year, and we did 3 or 4 shows that year, and it went over so well. They said we're going to do it a second year, and it was the first time they'd actually done Peter Pan.
Yeah.
So, and then the next year after that, they tried Alice in Wonderland and didn't go as well. So they brought it back to Peter Pan, but they didn't ask me, which was okay. I was okay with not being asked, but one of the child stars, so we're talking 16 and 17, so we're talking 7-8 years ago now. One of the kids that was in the show with me as Hook is now getting ready to turn 19. He's 6'8". He is a fantastic dancer. I mean, it was amazing the height he was reaching and the spread of his legs, and I mean, he's all legs. But he's not going to be allowed to be a part of this anymore because, one, he's reached that age, but he has a full ride scholarship to a dance place, some
awesome.
dance college in Massachusetts.
Wow.
He will be, and when the show is over, they invite you to come up on the stage, and I had to go say hello to him. And when he saw me, he gave me a big hug, and he said, "You've always been my inspiration." And I said, "Well, that's probably not true, but I'm very proud of you for where you're going." And yes, I cried.
That is awesome.
It was awesome to see this boy of this height right here, and now he's bigger than I am. And he's an amazing dancer. I can't say enough about him. And so, if anybody catches this, Jake, the world is your oyster. Take all the pearls you can get. Yep. It is just you will. Here's what he reminds me of, and because of our age, you may remember this. You remember a dancer named Tommy Toon?
Mm-hmm, of course, yeah.
That's what he reminds me of. He reminds me of Tommy Toon. Tommy Toon was tall and was a great dancer and had a stage presence.
That was a cool thing.
Jake has a presence.
Wow.
He is amazing, and I expect to see a lot of things happen with
There you
him.
go.
So to Jake.
Absolutely.
So,
by the way, the senior homecoming skit, St. Augustine High School, class of 75, I played Captain Hook.
do you really?
There you go.
So another thing we have in common.
There you go.
Magic, comedy clubs.
Yeah.
Right? Acting.
Davey's
Davey's really good about picking up things
Wow,
like
you
this.
found this. That's a photo by Al Ortega. Al's great. Now, in that photo, this was actually a signing done at Dark Delicacies, and it was for charity. And over my left shoulder, to the right side, that's Billy Boyd, I believe, who was one of the hobbits in the series.
Oh, really?
I mean, the movies. Yeah, the series of movies. And Victoria Burrows is actually directly above me. She's a casting director, and I've worked with Victoria several times. Tara Cardinal in The White, the redhead, and she's an actress and also an independent film producer. She's done some pretty amazing things. And I think Gary Graham was also, there's Gary over in the upper left. Gary had a series called Alien Nation. He did a lot of work in the Star Trek franchise.
Oh, I remember Alien Nation.
Yeah, and I hired him for a show.
Hey, Kara, will you do me a favor?
What's that?
Where are you at?
I'm right here.
All right.
Funny.
My stage tech here. The camera that's on there, I've never even used it. The camera is up by the TV up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Follow the cord down to where it's connected to another cord and pull the plug. Because my brother said that there's some echoing going on, and it may be because of that camera. We'll see if that fixes it.
Like, John Dirt, window, right.
So, as I said before we went anywhere, Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell.
Is he?
This is an on-air Bruce with a cigar,
Aye.
or George Papard. So
He
it's a Brit.
oh, that's it, George Papard. I love it when a plan comes together.
Yep.
Aye, that was always a good line. Always a good way to close
You
the
look
show.
for catch lines in the show.
Yeah.
And that was one of the catch lines.
That was, yeah. And I liked A-Team. I really like George Papard. My father, strangely enough, knew Dirk Benedict.
Oh, Dirk's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and knew him because Dirk Benedict went through a cancer scare, and he went to the islands to take care of it because certain things that were legal in the islands weren't legal in the United States. At the same time that my father did the same thing. and that's how they met.
Wow.
So yeah, I was a George Peppard fan anyway because he did a lot of other things that were really cool. But the whole series was just a lot of fun.
Oh, it was. It was a Roadrunner cartoon.
It was basically. Here's the one thing I always laugh about, not just with the A-Team, and this is just an observational thing because I look at everything from a comical point of view. A whole lot of bullets were flying in every one of the shows, and nobody was ever really hurt or shot.
Yeah, that was kind of one of our mandates. And interestingly enough, I talked to, I had, I think it was last year, toward the end of last year, there was a little get together about a book that was coming out about the A-Team, written by Tobias Larko. You can look him up. The book is called Absolute A-Team. Now it is, Tobias is German, and so the book is in German. It is one of the most concise compendiums of our show. It is thick.
Really?
And, you know, he called me. I sent him some of the script notes I have had and some of the production reports. And it is really a great book. Hopefully it'll be turned into English one day. But he came out to give it to us. And so we had a little party, myself, Babs Grayhowski, who was a writer on the show, and actually was the producer who first hired me. She was there, and a couple of the stunt people. And, you know, it's like I hadn't seen them in so long. And first thing I said to was, I said, look, I'm sorry, I tried to kill you in every episode. And by the way, if you watch the A-Team and you see those cars flipping over and you see the guy hanging off the side of this truck and you see them falling out of this plane and then just like crashing into something, no CGI, no AI. Those guys did it.
Those guys did it.
They are amazing.
They're that kind of stunt work doesn't always happen anymore.
Well, it is easy now. Jessica is my wife, Jessica Bronner. She and I yesterday in Lando, there's a coffee shop called Ground and Pound, and it was started by Jeff Pruitt and Sophia Crawford. Jeff is a stunt coordinator, and Jeff was the stunt coordinator for Buffy. And then I brought him in for the latter part of working on Sheena. And he has worked on so many movies and so many shows. And Sophia was Sarah Michelle Gellar's stunt double.
Oh, okay.
And I hired her for an episode of Sheena where she had to punch somebody, and she did a double punch. And literally, the actor, John Allen Nelson, he pauses for a minute and he goes, oh, it was so fast, he didn't know he had to react. And when I looked at the film, it looks like one punch, and it was two.
Wow.
She was amazing. However, we talked about this, about the fact that these days things have changed.
Right.
And you can say it is a lot safer. That is true. Absolutely. But there was, and one of the things that Jeff and I talked about is that a lot of people, especially if they're not working in LA, they're working in other states. There are a lot of people who are the young studs. And I mean, that the male and female thing was like, oh, yeah, I can take a punch. I can do this, but they're not trained to.
Right.
And that becomes dangerous. But watching the professionals, you get out there and they're going to do just a simple ramp and roll of a car, which I say simple, except they're out there saying, okay, we've measured this thing off. What do you want? You want to roll? How many feet do we have on this thing? Okay, you got 70 feet. 70 feet. Okay, 70 feet. Our ramp is 30 degrees. Let's hit it at... It was a science.
It is a science.
Amazing.
Yeah. It is. Everything about the stunt work. And there's a movie that keeps flashing in my head. It just came out maybe over the last 2 or 3 years, and I can't remember the name of it. Was it?
Well, The Fall Guy came out. Then there was a movie called The Stuntman.
The Stuntman, and the guy is.
That was a while back though.
And at the end of the movie, what was the TV show about all the stunt people? That was
The Fall Guy.
That was Fall Guy.
Yeah. Then they made a movie about it.
Yeah. So at the end of this movie, the actors from The Fall Guy make cameo appearances.
Yes. Yeah. That was the.
That was Stunt Guy, right? Or Stuntman?
No. That was the Fall Guy movie.
Yes.
With
what was
Ryan. Well, Lee Majors was the star of the Fall Guy.
Yes.
Yeah. And I worked with Lee on Raven. He was a lot of fun too. But yeah,
So-
and always do cameos. When they did the 18 movie, I
Yeah.
sat there. Of course, George had passed away, but I'm sitting there looking for, because they brought in the cameos, and I could see there's Dwight back there, there's Dirk over there, and there's T.
So one of the nice things about doing these kind of conversations is
Are they still watching? My gosh! Oh, hey,
there's people there.
it was just you and me.
And one of the nice things about these conversations is that I may have had a direction that I wanted to take this, but it's never going to go in that direction. Fall Guy, there it
you
is.
go. Yeah,
See?
Ryan Gosling. Who, by the way, played young Hercules. The spinoff for Hercules was Young Hercules, and Ryan played
Really?
Young Hercules.
Wow.
And I remember when I saw the first dailies of Young Hercules, because we were exchanging dailies back and forth. I looked at it, I said, "Boy, he has kind of a soft look. I hope he has some success."
So let's go back to Bruce Campbell real quick. His character was Autolycus.
Yep.
What was he? The master thief or the thief
Yes,
of
he
all
was. He was
thieves
the
or
master thief, the king of thieves.
king of thieves.
Uh-huh.
And so when he did the television show out of Miami,
Burn
Notice.
Uh-huh.
I actually, and I'll say this about several characters. Johnny Depp's another one.
Mm-hmm.
There were character similarities between what he did in Xena and what he did in the Burn Notice.
Mm-hmm.
His character. Some of these actors, their character traits follow them even no matter what the character is.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you can't watch anything that Johnny Depp does now without going, yeah, there's a little bit of Jack Sparrow in everything he does.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing.
No.
But
Jimmy Stewart.
yeah.
Jimmy Stewart's that is Jimmy Stewart, but yet he still pulls off Glenn Miller. Yeah.
And how does he do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still Jimmy Stewart.
So I have, believe it or not, I have Bruce Campbell's book.
If Jens could talk or whatever it was.
No, it was I'm the B-rated actor.
Yeah.
Yes, I have his book, and one of these days, if I ever get to meet him, and I've actually trying to contact him because I know he lives in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Try to bring him into one of our pirate festivals because everybody that comes to our pirate festival would love him because he was in Xena, and I'll have him autograph my book.
There you go, of course.
So, but yeah, I mean, these characters in these series, A-Team and Hercules and Xena and Riptide, just to name 4 of them, and if you were to rattle them all off again, probably 3 dozen of them. But the characters that these people portray, that you create with the other writers, they become icons, not the right word, because I think it becomes more personal. They become, in many cases, some of these characters become more like your family. Does that make sense?
Well, ideally, that's what you want people to kind of, if not feel it directly, you want them to have kind of a feeling of that familiarity, that they're comfortable with them. Even the villains. Villains are the hardest things to write because you still have to get people to identify with them somehow.
Yeah, and they have to either love them or hate them.
But even in the hate thing, I taught I did a whole lecture about writing villains and how and I used basically from history, and I said, the Snidely Whiplash idea of the twirling mustache, and there's Bruce. Yeah, if chins could kill, that was what I was trying to think of. But if you think of the Snidely Whiplash, he's puts Nell on the track and ties her up and everything. That's a caricature. But if you can portray a villain to where the viewer recognizes something, and I've used this in my lecture. I use the example of Hitler. I say, obviously, that's one of the hardest characters you could ever write.
Right.
Because absolute evil and everything. Okay. And I say, you know about the history, you know about the genocide, you know about the Holocaust, you know about how many hundreds of millions of people died because of that. We know that. That doesn't scare me anymore because those are numbers. The thing about Hitler, and I use this in my lecture, Hitler loved dogs. I love dogs. And the idea that I could have had a pleasant conversation about our love of dogs with Hitler doesn't just mean that I can touch Hitler, it means Hitler could touch me. That evil can touch me, and I identify with a part of it.
Well,
And that's terrifying. If you can do a villain like that, that's
Yeah.
terrifying to the audience.
well, and here's how at some point in my pirate tours, we talk about illiteracy.
Mhm.
Because most of them were, and that wasn't just pirates, most of the world. But the men that became the leaders of these pirates, most of them were educated, could read, were well read, and they were leaders for a reason.
Mhm.
And I'll say this: oh, you put your at the bottom. I'll say this, and it's dangerous to say things when you make references to Hitler. It really is. It really is. But as a historian, he really was a brilliant man. He was just whack.
There was which historian brought this up, and I'm the same thing. Sometimes you have to take your visceral reaction and put it aside so that you can actually stay with the legitimacy of what you're reading.
Right.
And somebody had pointed out that if he had died, I know this is going to be a horrible thing to say, but this is from a historian's perspective. If he had died in 1926, he would have been considered one of the most brilliant statesmen ever because of what he did to bring back Germany.
Right. After the First World War.
But all of that led to what happened later on.
Right.
So yeah, you have to be very careful when you are talking about that, especially when you're talking about a characterization. But it is something that I think people should understand, not just as creators, not just as writers, actors, directors. It's something that people should understand about themselves, that we all have a bit of something inside of us, and that at any moment we can be touched by it. And when you can recognize that, if I wrote a villain because I recognize something about me and I put it into that villain, my audience is more likely to lean into it as opposed to just sit back and say, I've seen this before.
So, and you may or may not know, so you can correct me, but didn't Anthony Hopkins, the great Anthony Hopkins, he portrayed Hitler in a movie?
Yes, you're correct. I will, however, say that I think Downfall was one of the best portrayals of, and that's a German film, and even with the subtitles. And it's all from the perspective of one of Hitler's secretaries, and this it's the last months in the bunker. And it is, to say it's scary, just underestimates it.
And this, I mean, we've gone off on this new tangent now.
No, we
but,
did.
and I'm gonna push it to this direction.
Okay.
As a historian, and you like history too,
Mhm.
it is wrong for us in any way, shape, or form to remove history from our past.
Yes, I agree with you.
It can't.
You can put it in perspective, but you can't remove it.
You can't, and that's so.
We learn from history so
we
that we
have
can
to
observe
learn.
it.
So we don't repeat it too.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
And learn what you glorify, what you respect, and what you should look at and say, that's a warning. But you have to put it in that perspective.
I've done
You can't ignore
so much hogging of this conversation that I probably have left my viewers with a lack of an opportunity. So, Davey, I'm wandering back through to see what we got for some really good questions. Let's see what happens here.
Let's see what people
So I'm gonna try to acknowledge everybody. I know that Harker may have already gone offline because it's gotten late and he has to get up every morning. He's in Michigan, by the way. Nightingale in Florida, you know who that is. Blackball is over in Panama City, part of the White Sands pirate crew. Sky Jockey is Melinda's husband.
And by the way, I know it's Mark. When you mentioned earlier about the educated pirates,
Yeah.
Okay. Jessica, my wife, again, we were having a conversation about the R, okay, the language thing. And I was mentioning her, I said a lot of that comes from the Treasure Island movie.
It does.
Because in fact, those captains were actually extremely articulate for their group. I mean, you had Creole groups, you had French groups, you had all that and mixed things, but they were not the caricature.
No. Robert Newton was Long John Silver.
I was trying to think of the name of the actor.
Robert Newton.
That was it, Robert Newton.
And as I tell people, and we don't know it totally for sure, but it just makes for a good line, that he, like any other actor, he forgot his lines while they were filming one of his scenes. And what do actors do when they forget their lines? The improv, which I then tell everybody is a Latin word that means make crap up.
Yeah.
And so that's how it came about. Stalag.
Stalag X. Yes, that is a graphic novel. I co-wrote that with Kevin J. Anderson. We created that together. Mike Ratera did the interior art. Those of you might recognize Kevin. Kevin, he and Brian Herbert write all the Dune sequel books. Kevin is an amazing author. He's got like he sold 26 million books around the world. And we've known each other for decades. So we worked on this graphic novel together, originally trying to develop it as a TV series. It was finally published by The Vault, and it has been picked up. It's in the options list in current development over, I believe, United Pictures Entertainment. They did 1917 and Rocketman as a film because Francis Lawrence, the director, took the option on it and he wants to make it. And Francis, by the way, one of my favorite directors. He directed Constantine, I Am Legend, Red Sparrow, all but one of the Hunger Games movies. And everybody who's worked with him has just lauded him. And my experience with him has been great. So that's what Stalag X is.
Very cool, very cool. So I see, here's one. This is not necessarily a question, but it goes back to how we talked about assessing people.
Yes.
So Nightingale in Florida was a nurse. When she was a community health nurse, assessed my clients the same way, looking for positive things, find what they really cared about, looked for a way to connect. Absolutely. It is important. The connection is very, very important.
Yeah. And by the way, that positivity, that has a clinical effect. It has an actual physical clinical, your body does better when there's positivity around it.
Yes, absolutely. So here's one. Omar, I hope you're still on board with us. I know it may be late, but Omar is in Mexico City.
Ah, yeah.
It's amazing to listen to such an amazing person. Very easygoing, even when he was part of the best shows on TV. Have you ever wanted to be part of a pirate show?
Okay, I can't talk too much about this. Yes, there was a pirate series that these three guys had come up with this idea, and it was a wonderful idea. God, I have to be so careful because I know that they've taken it around and may still be in the works. And Sony Television, Sony TriStar, was interested in this, and I had just done work with Sony. So they and another person brought me on board for that. I was never officially a part of it, although when they put out early releases on it, they had listed me as a producer. And if it had gone to production at that time, then yes, I would have worked on that one as a pirate series. And unfortunately for you, I can't talk about it, but you'll probably hear about it when we're done.
Very good. I look forward to hearing about it. I like Black Sails too. I list out during my tour. I list out all the movies and TV shows that I can think of, but there are a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't all necessarily have to lean towards the history side of it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it when they have some of it in there. So Omar made another comment. Thank you. As far as I know, there are no pirate shows besides Black Sails, but I know why. I don't know why is that. Maybe is not very interesting topic. So Omar, if you're still watching, send me a private message. I'll share with you a list. There are, believe it or not, since the dawn of time, which would be movies, there are over 500 pirate movies worldwide since the time of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not. Not all of them are American. There are some that are in foreign languages, and I'm kind of trying to do a collection of every one of them from my collection, just to say I have them all. But there are a ton of them. There are some that are really bad, but as I always like to say, you know, the 5 Pirate of the Caribbean movies, the first one and the second one were great. The third, the fourth, and the fifth were marginal, but it doesn't matter because as long as they keep putting out pirate movies, I have a job.
Well, I'll tell you the movie that I have longed to see, and the lead character, he's going to know this, has been referenced in movies and in TV shows that deal with pirates, and it was the leader of the largest pirate fleet in history.
That would be the Chinese one.
That's absolutely right.
Yep.
They've referenced the character and like, this is worthy of it. I mean, she toppled empires.
And here's a point that makes her story very interesting. even for Chinese,
Mhm.
she ran everything that she did slightly totalitarian because she was the boss,
Mhm.
but there was a essence of democracy even within her private.
She was. It's interesting because
and that's unusual for Chinese culture.
Yeah, and there was a book out called the top 100 influential people in history. And I was like, it's sad that she was not in the top 10 at least, and because they kind of became male centric, and one of them that this particular historian mentioned was, for example, Muhammad, and because he was not just, he began as an itinerant person, but became a politician, a warrior, founded a religion, a leader, all of those things together. She was very similar to that because she had the power, but she knew how to use the diplomacy.
And the diplomacy is that she used garnered the fact that as long as she was protecting all of the Chinese coast, the governments of China, the warlords of China, granted her and all her pirates and her pirates number in the 10,000, granted them all immunities. They were all given pardons to a point. And it's a very interesting story. There's another one that would be worthy of a movie. And for the life of me, I can't think of her name, but she is a French pirate. And she painted her ships black and made her sails
I know you're
all
talking
red.
about.
It would be worthy of a movie.
Yes, you're right.
Because the basic line of the story is her husband owns, and they're wealthy, and he owns property in, I'm going to say Normandy, and I could be wrong, but somewhere along that coastline, and he wants to sell it. Nobody wants to buy it. But a British person wants to buy it and buys it. So the French government finds that to be traitorous and executes him. So she takes and liquidates everything she has and buys several ships, paints them black with red sails, and terrorizes the French coast because of her revenge motive.
Yeah.
That's
a great story.
It is a great start of a story. So and I'm going to, I asked you a question a couple of weeks back about do you read books and consider them to be possible worthy of a series?
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
I do that, yeah.
Okay. Before you leave here tonight, I'm going to give you a book. But we're going to talk about it afterwards. We're not going to talk about it here. But the person that wrote the book, him and his daughter wrote this book, and I read it in 2 sittings. I read it in 2 nights. It's that good. And I'm going to give you a copy of it.
I got it. Okay.
And but that's all I can do. I'm the messenger. So there is a Spanish soap opera that is about pirates, but I don't remember the name. You have that in your list, Captain? I'll have to look. I don't remember that one. So I will look for that one. Piratas. I will have to look at that. I mean, there is even a porn movie called Pirates of the Caribbean,
which I've never seen, but it's really well done. But
yeah,
I've never seen
a bit of it, not at all. So let's see who else is in here. Blackball, Cutthroat Island.
Cutthroat Island, yeah,
now,
there you go.
Cutthroat Island is my favorite pirate movie.
I'll tell you, it was panned, but it's an enjoyable movie.
It is a great movie. The chase scene on the carriages through the city,
yeah,
while the Navy is firing cannons at them and destroying the city, is a great chase scene. But here's what I tell everybody if it comes up in my tour. There are 3 reasons why Cutthroat Island is my favorite movie. Hey, Davey, put that poster back up real quick. Here are the 3 reasons. Her.
Yeah, Gina.
Right. That's my first reason.
Yeah.
Second reason is that she was a redhead. Third reason, she wore a corset. That's all I need for a pirate movie. That's it. I'm done. So, but it was a great movie. It really was. But
by the way, one of Gina's first appearances was on a TV show called Riptide.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And in fact, Riptide, we gave Riptide. There was a young guy who came in and played a bad guy. And to this day, he still thanks Riptide because that's got him his SAG card. That was George Clooney.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He started a few people, although they were so incredibly talented. They were stars.
So my son asked another religious question.
Oh, back here, yes.
So didn't Lucifer and the archangel Michael appear in
We're referencing Xena because he's.
Yeah.
I guess this is off the last question.
Yeah.
Because didn't Lucifer and the Archangel Michael appear? Yes, Michael definitely appeared.
Michael definitely
Yeah.
appeared.
And I think we made allusions to the Lucifer idea, but I did 5.5 seasons of the show of Xena, and it went for 6 seasons. I went off to create the other show, Ashina, that time. But I did start one of the threads which dealt with a character named Dayhawk. And that's where a lot of people reference that that's the Lucifer figure. And Dayhawk first appeared as a fiery being in an episode of Xena. And in fact, that was an episode I wrote where I was trying to basically play on people's expectations. And the idea was that Xena was obsessed with Caesar, and Boadicea was fighting Caesar, and she was going to go help Boadicea because she had this obsession against Caesar. And of course, Boadicea and Xena, they weren't necessarily friends. They were antagonists, earlier, but they had to work together. And then what appeared to be the side thread was that Gabrielle meets this guy that the Romans are taking off to execute. And, they free this guy, and his name is Craftstar. And he talks about the one God and the God of peace bringing peace to the world.
So he's your reference to Jesus.
So as the episode goes on, it is a thread where you realize Gabrielle's more curious about these things. And he talks about how peace will come to the earth once the one God is in place. And then what you realize right at the end is I basically fooled everybody because I played on exactly what you said. Your training, your background, and the world you live in says, oh, that's the Christianity. No, it wasn't. I was borrowing from a different belief system, Zoroastrianism. And that God was actually, the one he was referencing, was the evil version of that particular belief. Because every villain or villainous God or whatever will tell you the same thing. I will bring peace to the earth once I wipe out all the people.
That's true.
And
That's
so
true.
what you realize at the end of it, right toward the end of the show, is you realize that, oh my gosh, the whole episode was about Xena's obsession with Caesar blinded her to the danger that this was. So that Dayhawk is often referred to as the Lucifer type of figure. Now, when I left the show, it's possible that there was an episode that referenced Lucifer more directly, but I wasn't there.
Now, there were other gods, Greek and or Roman gods, that were part
All
of
over
the
the
Xena.
place.
Who's the god of war?
Ares,
Ares.
played by
Ares
Kevin
was-
Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Kevin was such a wonderful guy.
And he was Ares, and then you had gosh, I can see his face, and I can't think of his name.
Well, we had Ares, we had Cupid. That was played by
Who's the counterpart to
Aphrodite.
you had Aphrodite.
There's
and then-
Alex Tidings, who's just wonderful. She's
Yeah.
a friend of mine as well.
Yeah.
She's just awesome.
I mean, Xena Princess Warrior took all of the things that we studied when we were in school,
Mhm.
the Greek classics and the
Sure.
Roman classics,
Yeah.
and put them all together.
And I know those of you who are huge fans of the show, if you're watching, it's Xena Warrior Princess, not Princess Warrior, but that's okay. He's cool. We played across the gamut on all of these because there were so many interesting stories about the interaction of the gods, especially the pagan gods, and humanity. And one of the things that I kind of coined was the idea that this was the twilight of the gods. This was when the first mortals stood up to them and said, no more, we're not your playthings. That came directly out of the opening of Hercules, where they mentioned that when mere humans were the playthings or toys, some paraphrasing of that. And so Xena was like, no, I'm going to stand up to the gods. So we borrowed across different areas, focusing initially on the Greek gods and the Roman gods, and then we moved on.
There he is, right there.
Yeah, and Kevin unfortunately passed away. He had an accident. He was actually supposed to co-star with Bruce Willis in Tears of the Sun, and he had finished filming on a show, and there was some sort of an accident that happened afterwards. And I remember we were all at a convention on our phones, what was going to happen. He was in a coma, and then they made a decision. And he was gorgeous. He was talented. He was a singer. He was big and physical. and you could make him blush just by telling him that, hey, you know how many people are in love with you, and you go, oh, get on with your mate, and you just walk on.
So let's go back to your reference real quick about the gods, and
Yes.
that the people threw away the notion that they needed the gods. That's pretty much why the gods eventually cease to exist. And it is part of some of the movies where some of the gods now are angry because they don't mean anything to anybody, and they try to. So there are a couple movies that they try to set themselves in place for.
Right.
I can use that reference to pirates.
Okay.
You ready?
Don't doubt. Go ahead.
All right.
What'd you do?
So pirates, it wasn't necessarily the
Stole
money.
my words.
It was the freedom, and it was the creation of democracy that they created. And they believed that they may not have understood that they were a good example, but I believe that they were the example to all the people in the New World that you don't need all those royal families to tell you how to live your life. You can run your own life by the own sweat of your brow and everything that goes with it, by respect, giving and taking. And so it is a same reference to the gods.
Yeah. There's Aphrodite, by the way, on the right side of the screen. That's Alex Titan. She's playing Aphrodite, the goddess of love.
Oh, she was gorgeous too.
Oh yeah, and she, like I said, she's just a great person. Yeah, interesting thing about the pirates. I remember talking to somebody about pirates actually, and it was again reference to the Chinese fleet. And I said, do you realize the logistical knowledge that you have to organize that many people?
True.
And control them.
And control them. And here's the other part, and this is in my tours. The pirate captain is voted into place.
Yeah, when I actually read about that, and I was like, so wait a minute. So it's not always the guy who can like kill the most people.
It's not the biggest and baddest with a sword, because the one most important rule in the code of all pirates, and the original codes were created by Bartholomew Robertson and Henry Morgan. Yes, the same Henry Morgan that's on the bottom.
Yeah.
So their code had, and both of them, the words are similar, not exact, but both of them have the words, every man, regardless of the color of the skin, the nation of their origin, or their religious belief, every man has an equal share of the work, an equal share of the money, equal share of the food, equal share of the rum. They all get equal shares. And the second part of that says they all get an equal voice in affairs of the moment. Affairs of the moment means that anything that's happening to that ship that includes the entire ship, the crew just decides on. They vote on it, they debate it, they argue it, they debate it. They voted the captain into place. And let's just say, as an example, they voted me into place and I want you to be one of my officers. That's not automatic either. I have to now stand before the crew and tell everybody why you're the best man for the job. And then they have to vote you in. If they don't vote you in, I have to get somebody else.
Wow.
So the captain of a pirate ship runs the ship by the will of the crew.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So they're teaching this by example. They're not teaching it because we know everything. But by example, they're showing the world, the new world.
Yeah.
And the royal families of all of Europe are realizing that they have no place in the real world.
Well, again, that is, once again, standing up to the gods in this sense. It's like, wait a minute. Have we really thought about why we've done this monarchy thing for so long?
Yeah.
No, I never really thought of it. We just did it.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about it.
Let's don't do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's basically why everything on this side of the planet in the new world is run by a different form of government. The biggest, obviously, was the United States, but it's an amazing comparison because I also tell people, and it comes out in the shows that you're doing, Xena especially, culture progresses by the will of the people.
Yes, and what fights the will of the people is the inertia of the past. Because again, it comes down to that, well, we've always been doing this, and we are maybe not happy, but we're familiar with it. Well, you want to take a chance here and basically stand up and say no? It's like I used to say about when they used to move cattle across the country. Okay? The way a lot of the cowboys would do it is that they would go over to one side of the herd fire off a gun and make noises, scare the cattle to go in one direction. Then another would go over to the other side, fire off a gun or scare the cattle. And it was always about scaring the cattle to make them go in a certain direction.
True.
Not once did a cow stand up and say, "Why the hell are you firing that gun?"
Well, the first thing I would think of is if a cow stood up and actually said
I know.
that, I'd probably make money on a talking cow.
I was going to say, and I'd be writing the movie version of that.
Going on topic of Black Sails earlier, who is your favorite character or story arc?
I only watched the first episode and then I got involved with the project. I couldn't finish it. So that's a question for you.
That's a hard one. And the reason it's a hard one for me is because I realize, and some people don't, I realize that Black Sails is a combination of real history and Treasure Island.
Okay.
And here's where Treasure Island is part of it. Captain Flint, Treasure Island, and John Silver, who becomes Long John Silver. It is the creation of their characters from a fictional side blended into real historical pirates.
Okay.
So I liked Flint because he was strong, but I really liked some of the other characters like Calico Jack. He was in there. And I really enjoyed the character of Anne Bonny because she was a no-nonsense, not taking any crap from any man, which is how we do understand some of her issues in real life. And she was a redhead.
By the way, my bias there, my wife is a redhead.
Yes. So, I mean, and I'll, my wife is now a lovely white hair, but when we first met, she was redheaded.
She would always be.
So she was always the other that way. So how about being able, and this was something that, this is Nightingale. How about being able to navigate a ship without GPS? There's Anne Bonny. She was, if you look at real pictures of Anne Bonny, you can understand how she was able to dress as a man and get away with it. But that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to be ugly about it. But how about being able to navigate a ship without GPS, weather forecasts, or even a map when they dared to explore? The navigator and or the captain they had to be intelligent.
Oh God! They had to, yes.
And as we talk about, and even our reference to Hitler. And this will make sense.
I hope so. Boy, I can't wait to hear the linkage here. Go right ahead.
Here's the linkage. It's always the most intelligent men that become the leaders of the pack. And maybe maybe not entirely intelligent. What's the other word I want to use here?
They're intelligent enough.
Influential. That's not the right word.
Yeah, and there's a larger discussion about this, but these are people who there's a natural intelligence, quote unquote, that they have, and they know how to pluck tribal strings that we have and we don't recognize. Racism is a tribal string, and that has to do with survival genes. It's like my community. If you don't look like my community, you could be dangerous. And so if you can pluck that string, you can manipulate people. So I will say, that's why I put the intelligence in quotes. It's not necessarily an educational thing. There is an intuitive aspect, boy, and it's a dark area.
And I know we keep referencing Xena, and you did so many other things, but Xena is probably one of the most popular.
It is, yeah, it is.
In all the stories of Xena, even though she came from, as you said earlier, she
would actually reference sometimes. We said Hitler in a skirt. We said that a couple of times.
Really?
Because we were trying to darken her past. Not in the series. We said it internally so we could remind ourselves that she came from an evil past.
And she does. And you do portray that in the series. But here's the other side of it. She's always taken the side of the underdog and helping the villagers and the people.
In the series.
Yes.
In the series we did. But it started. In the 3-episode arc that was in Hercules showed her that there was a better way.
Right.
Now, the first episode called Sins of the Past, the first actual episode of the series that was written by R.J. Stewart. And, the series was created by Rob Tappert and John Schulian. But R.J. wrote the first episode. And those of you who watch the show, you'll recognize this. But in the opening of that episode, she has taken off her famous brass outfit, and she has taken her sword and her chakram, the little round circle thing, and she's burying them.
Right.
And I've told people that she was saying, I'm done, I'm committing suicide, because she cannot possibly atone for what she's done. Because she knows the first warlord that sees her will challenge her, because they'll get the credit they kill Xena, and she now has left herself defenseless. And so she's burying that. And then she hears this voice of this woman yelling, and she goes and investigates it, and there's this young girl, and there's villagers behind her, and she's standing up to a warlord. That's Gabrielle.
Right.
And for some reason, something resonates with her. Well, Gabrielle was who she could have been had she not followed the darker side. And we had a whole history worked out of how that progressed. And some of it was, RJ is also a historian, I am. And we would talk about, well, this is very similar to the buffer states that the Soviet Union used, that she made conquered villages to protect her original village. And then after a certain point, it was just about conquering. So we had a whole history about her.
So here's a point, just to prove a point.
Yes.
Almost every movie created or TV shows are just a readaptation of something else. And here's my point.
Okay.
There are 1880s gunfighters
Mm-hmm.
who put their guns away,
Absolutely, yeah.
didn't want to do it anymore, realized they were bad, and then find themselves in a position that they have to open that chest,
Gotta
put
take
the
it back
guns
up.
on, and go fight the bad guys. And that's what Xena was.
And the idea that what you used at one time to actually hurt people can still be used to save people, because it's the character.
Yes.
One of my favorite John Wayne movies, The Shoots.
Yes. I think The Shootist is in my top 3 with John Wayne.
I think it's because it mirrored so much of what he was going through at that time. Because we
it-
knew about he was
right.
cancer,
And if
he
you
was
read
dying.
about it, yes. And I think the other reason it was a great movie is because all the gunfighters that came to do him in were all famous movie gunfighters from times before.
Yeah,
Richard
sure.
Boone.
Yep.
I can't think of the guy's name that was a handsome, very well dressed, sharp guy.
Mhm.
I can't think of his name, but they were. So it took. The Shootist was probably the final movie we ever needed to really see about the way gunfighters really were.
And also, and the effect that had on the young man in it, Ron Howard, who idolized him and thought, I want to be like this. Excuse me. Woo. But he realized, no, that's not what I want to be. I want to be what he became, the character he became.
Right.
But I don't need to go through that to get there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for those who haven't seen it,
It is a great
not your
movie.
traditional type of shoot 'em up, Indians running around.
No.
It's not that. It is really good. And Liberty Balance also is another.
Liberty Balance, that's a good one. I mean,
There's a heroic mode. I mean, there just is. There's a model to it.
and there's a heroic mode in Xena. There's a heroic mode in Sheena. And really, in an off kind of way, I'll bring the A-Team into it.
Mhm.
These guys in the A-Team get accused of some atrocities that most of us really don't believe it ever happened. It was a setup, maybe, but they use their ingenuities and their abilities to help those that are less fortunate.
Yeah, and what they were accused of is they were accused of robbing from the Bank of Hanoi.
Yeah.
And then killing off the officer who had actually ordered that, even though they had nothing to do with that. But yes, the idea was that you could hire the A-Team. You never really saw money being transferred.
Right.
So if you had a cause, if you had something that they would believe in and believe in you, they would come to your defense and they would help.
So here's a reference for you.
Mhm.
The A-Team was a more,
Dun, 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 dun.
there it is right there. The A-Team was a more, I don't want to use the word violent, but it's the only word that comes into my head. The A-Team was a more violent adaptation of MacGyver, because the A-Team could take anything and make anything.
True, but they did have ARs and they were using them quite liberally.
They did.
But yeah, the whole idea is we always had that. The A-Team was very formulaic. There was always this and this and this and this. And we, toward the end of the series, we actually started moving more in the direction of, we kept those plot points so that the adventure would be there, and we explored more with the characters. I was the one who wrote the episode where Dirk's character, Faceman, may have found his father. And that ended up, I mean, Dwight and Dirk did this wonderful interaction in a scene that I had written where Dirk realizes that the guy who may be his father died, and he didn't even know it, but he found out that Murdoch knew all along, and they have been best friends. But the action adventure aspect of it, we would always have that moment of, okay, what are they going to build? And I like one episode that my partner and I had a partner when I started out there, a wonderful guy named Bert Pearl. We were best friends, and we just fell into this writing thing. And he was incredibly talented. He passed away, unfortunately. But I remember one time we're sitting there, we're writing a thing about tow trucks. That was the whole MacGuffin of it, was tow trucks. And I put in little Easter eggs in some of my episodes that deal with St. Augustine, by the way.
Really? I'm going to have to go back now and start looking.
So anyway, we wrote this, and we're like, what are they going to build out of a tow truck? And we were like, what could you not build out of a tow truck?
And I remember
big old battle wagon.
I think that the whole tow truck episode was about a bad company that was doing all kinds of towing on everybody and trying to put another tow truck company out of business.
They were trying to put them out of business because they had the contract to bring American cars that had broken down in Mexico into the United States, and drugs were being hidden with the cars. So that was what the plot.
Yep.
And the name of the company that was the hero company, with the one they came to the defense was Corson's Tow Truck Company. And that was a nod to one of my teachers, Mr. Corson.
Really?
But there's an episode, if you want to see references of the St. Augustine thing, Bert and I wrote an episode called Mission of Peace.
Okay.
And it was set in Texas, but it was about these elderly people who ran a tourist attraction called the Mission. And it was, based on the mission that went through Texas. However, the references that were in there, Murdoch suddenly felt that he was the descendant of John Moultrie. I mean, we just we peppered it in with all of these St. Augustine type of references. And it's still kind of fun and delightful to watch. And in fact, one of them was, we had Iron Eyes Cody was in the episode. And he was, you stand next to him, you get a picture with him, because that was part of the tourist attraction. And it said, you had a big placard that said, picture with Big Chief Watashi. Okay. Okay. Now, the thing is that my dad, when he would discipline us or something, said, you listen to Big Chief Watashi. That was his thing. So we put that in the episode. And just by luck, I was going to be flying home back to St. Augustine, and my dad's birthday was coming up, and that episode was going to air on his birthday. So I called down to the prop department. I said, you got to give me that sign. So they got it to me. I framed it, took it with me, and we're watching the episode, and you see him say, get a picture with Chief Watashi. My dad goes, wait a minute, that's me. And I pulled out that placard, and he hung that in his office.
How cool is that?
It's so cool.
How cool is that?
But it's peppered with all sorts of St. Augustine. I do that all the time in a lot of my writing. Even in the, there you go.
There he is, right there. And there's Dirk.
Yeah.
And there's
T over there in the left.
over
George is in the lower right.
So was
Dwight?
I think I liked his character more than the others.
Okay. Well, he was fun.
But he was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, Dwight still is a brilliant actor. Just was underrated. If you ever saw the movie he did with Paul Newman, Fat Man, Little Boy. It was about the Manhattan Project. He played Opperman.
Really?
Oppenheimer.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that now.
He was so good in that movie. He played Oppenheimer. He was just wonderful in that movie.
There are some references once in a while. Somebody will say, "Hey, did you see this?" And now I've got to go back and look at certain movies because you don't see them the same way.
Yeah,
and it's wonderful. We've reached the end of all of our questions. Let me see here. How about being? We already did that one. Let's see what this one is. So we may have lost some because we're believe it or not, we're on 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow.
I would say vain, largely in the way he was probably most accurately portrayed for his historical accounts. You know what, Blackall? I will give you this. Vain, yes, but he also ended up having his entire crew get rid of him. So for Stephen,
I was just about to bring this up, actually.
one of your other projects was AVP Prey.
Yeah.
Oh, what is?
Okay, I will tell you about that.
If I recall the earlier page, how did you become involved in that project, and what was your interest area in it?
I'm gonna try to shorten this.
What first explain what is AVP?
Yes, absolutely. Alien versus Predators.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. So this was such a fun experience, but it was a taxing experience. People know about the Aliens franchise and the Predator franchise, and then they made Alien versus Predator movies. They brought the two characters together from two different studios.
It's like bringing Freddy Krueger and Jason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
similar to that. And they were very successful. And there have been books out there about aliens and anthologies, short stories about aliens, and books about predators and short stories. So Disney, Fox, and Titan, the publisher, they decided to publish the first anthology of Alien versus Predators. So the two editors that were working on it, there were people that I knew, Jonathan Mayberry and Brian Allen Schmidt. So they asked me if I was interested in writing a short story in that world. And I was like, well, sure. Now, those of you who have written in that market, or you're familiar with that market, mostly for anthologies, you write the story first, then it's approved, and then you get a contract. If you don't get the contract, you basically wrote a story, and hopefully you can sell it somewhere else. Now, if you're dealing with franchise characters like these, you only got one store you can go to. So they sent this out, and one of the things about this is that this book was, they said, we really want to kind of push the diversity aspect of this. So kind of like, deal with that. And we're like, okay, fine. So that meant everything from the authors, and my writing was known very much for being very open. So I knew a lot about the aliens because I love those movies. I didn't know a lot about the predators. And for those of you who are big fans, it's an extremely structured society. It's a case society. Even the names mean something. You need a college degree to understand this. I was totally ignorant. So I thought, I'm going to write this from the perspective of somebody who was totally ignorant.
And the Predator movies, the very first one was Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
Arnold and Carl Weathers. And
Carl Weathers.
Carl and I were good friends.
And he's passed, right?
He
passed.
He and I actually were we were going to work on a project. We were developing it when he passed away. Anyway, so I said, all right, I'm going to do this from a perspective of ignorance. So my story, one of the backgrounds about aliens versus predators is that if you're a predator, there are two opponents that give you cred if you defeat them. Second on the list are humans. If you can defeat humans, you get cred. First on the list are aliens. So what they would do is they would like seed an area with the alien eggs, wait for them to come out, take over the local, whatever, fauna. Then they would come down and kill them so they could get cred. They made these arenas. Okay. My series, my episode, my short story is from the perspective of a Spanish nobleman. And this Spanish nobleman grew up in San Agustin. And in fact, he was there during the Oglethorpe attack, and he helped defend Fort Mose. And those were friends of his. And he was a Spaniard living in San Agustin. When the British took over the area, he and his family moved to Spain.
Right.
He had planned to go to school as a navigator. That's what he studied. But now he had to administer his family's holdings. So he would come back to San Agustin every now and then, kind of a Jesse Fish type of story. But he hated the English. He hated them. So in one of his trips back, he's shipwrecked on an island. And as he's there, suddenly these things rain down from the sky, and he goes and investigates. There's these eggs. They start to open, and these are the aliens. Now, he doesn't get hit by one of the aliens, but the monkeys living in the trees do. So now these aliens are up in the trees. And he, being a really good Catholic, looks at this and said, these are the malvados. These are evil ones. They are from hell. This is a devil's gate. That's how he interprets it. He doesn't know what they are. He doesn't know anything about aliens. And then one night, these three giants appear, and he knows what's going on. These are the Nephilim from the Bible. They are the giants sent by God to defeat the Malvados. And he watches this battle. During this battle, the Nephilim are losing because the aliens have the advantage of the trees, and they're actually losing this battle. And he's like despondent. He's like, oh, the hell is going to win? And one day he's watching one of the fights, and he looks over and he sees sails coming to the island. And he's like, I've got to get out there. Puts up his spyglass, and it's an English ship. And he hates the Calvinists. He hates the Lutherans, but he's got to get off the island. Runs down to the beach, and there are 3 longboats brought up. And he realizes not only are these English, these are slavers. And they brought slaves ashore in chains to forage. His friends were at Fort Mose, but he's still got to get off the island. So he's trying to warn them about what's happening. And only one is a translator who understands him. And then aliens attack. And as they attack, they wipe out the English soldiers, except for the translator. But the African slaves immediately form circles, and they start going, and the aliens are like, what is this? And they're moving across the dead Englishmen, picking up their swords, picking up their weapons, and they fight back. And they push the aliens back. And as they're doing this, they pick up the keys and they unlock themselves. And they are all women.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So the leader of the women, through the translator, talks to our perspective. And she realizes that they can't get away from here until this is taken care of. He can navigate that ship, but they're afraid that if they get on it, the aliens will then swarm the ship. So she decides that whoever these predators are, the Nephilim, she needs to make an alliance with them. Now, you will understand this. She talks him into taking her to where they are. And these are 2 completely different species, but they're both warriors. And they speak that unspoken language of warriors. And they sit there and they start mapping out how they're going to do this without saying a word. So when this actually happens, they all get off. It does. I won't tell you the ending, but it does kind of work its way out. All right. So I sent this off. And I was like, the editor sent me a note and said, this is like the best story. I'm like, oh, thank you. So then what happened is that Disney, they have sensitivity readers. And they want to make sure everything is accurate. And really, they're not trying to get in the way. They just want to make sure all the T's are crossed.
Right,
and
right.
dots. They want to be able to defend it. But they won't buy the story if they have a problem. And so I was told, you're going to get some emails and they're going to ask you a lot of questions. And I said, I know what happened. They looked me up on Google and look at how I look. They want to make sure that, they don't have a problem with this. I, by the way, I've been a proponent of this. So they started sending me these questions about what was going on in the story. And every time they brought in a historical question, I not only responded to the question, I linked to the actual history. Fort Mose, I linked to the actual website. And at one point, somebody had mentioned, they said, you have not even mentioned the Native Americans at that time. And I said, well, this takes place in the late 1700s. So all the Native Americans of that time went with the Spanish to Havana. So they weren't really in the area. There weren't that many of them at that point. And then one person said, well, yeah, point of a sword. And I went, so I wrote back and I said, I understand your point. And I said, I don't disagree with you. However, when the settlers first arrived at St. Augustine, there were no more than 1,800. There were tens of thousands of the local Native Americans, including the Temecula, which was the tribe that was the closest to them. They could have wiped them out. However, they were busy fighting Creek Indians and other Indians that the British supported. They saw an alliance. And I said, in fact, in about several generations, one of the queens of the Temecula, and they did have queens, converted to Catholicism to secure that alliance. So I said, by the time you get to us, our story, which is 200 years after this all happened, it wasn't a matter that they were converted at that time. They were already Catholic. They were 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation Catholic. And then I said, now, to put that in my story would require the lecture I just gave you. So I changed one word. And they were like, okay, we're fine. Now, went through the whole thing. And at one point, me sending all these links and everything, I sent them a note and I said, I find it very interesting that everything in my story is 100% historically accurate, except your predators and aliens. That's the only thing that's not accurate. Now, when I was done, they accepted the story, and it's in the anthology. It's called Alien versus Predator, Ultimate Prey. I got a really nice note, and it was forwarded to me by one of the editors from one of the heads of the sensitivity board, who's an African-American woman. And first thing she did, she thanked me for all of the links, because she said that made it so much easier for us. And then she said, and I want to thank you for bringing these women to my attention, because that's part of my heritage and I didn't even know about them. And they were the royal guard of the kingdom of Dahomey. They defended the king. And when the Dutch would come in and they were looking for slaves and things, because marketing of human beings was then big, they would defend him, and many of them were killed and captured and sent to slavery. But they were warriors.
Yeah.
Now, you remember the movie that came out shortly after I did this, called The Warrior Queen, I think it was. But it is about the Warrior
Yes.
Queen. Yeah, it is
The
about
Warrior
that.
Queen,
It is. They call them there's a different name for them. In my book, they're called the Minos, which is what their opponents called them. Minos means the mothers. They were like, these are the mothers who. But it was the same people. But it was all accurate. So I know, kind of a long-winded story, but in that short story, I pulled from my love of St. Augustine and my love of the history of St. Augustine, and I said, this is an amazing story. I can add this in. And so that was basically that was what Alien versus Predators were, for those of you that are still awake.
Well, now I guess we're gonna have to watch all of that.
Yeah, it's in Alien versus Predator, Ultimate Prey. And it's just the one short story in there. It's called Isla Matanzas.
Very cool. We'll have to watch that one then. I'm going to have to go back and start looking at a few things because of your references to St. Augustine.
Mhm.
There is one thing I will tell you, though.
Uh-oh.
So I when we talk about American history in my course, and if you disagree, it's okay. Because that's the best part about talking about history. Disagreements don't mean that we are adversaries.
We weren't there.
We weren't there. But when I'm dealing with the school children and I bring up the questions of what the Spanish had to deal with, and some of the school children say, well, the American Indians. And I said, they're not American Indians. And they're not American Indians because we're not America until 1700s. So that gives me the opening that I tell the children, words mean a whole lot. And things like founding. As a historian, I don't like it when people say Ponce de Leon came here and founded Florida. Founded always refers to me, it just makes reference that, well, Florida was here, it just was lost, he came and found it again. No, it wasn't. That word, I always like to tell everybody Ponce de Leon, and just as that reference, Ponce de Leon came here and established Spanish ownership and control. And I like that as a better reference than we use in our history books as the word founded. But there are other historians that will argue with me about that. But it's all about words.
Words are important. That is one of the things that forms everything about us. It puts restrictions on how we exchange knowledge, and it also gives us devices to exchange knowledge at the same time. When we grow up, the first thing that happens is we are taught a language which puts us into a certain box and says, this is how you communicate. So using that as a reference. I have often said, I've said this, I said, when you're saying that, Columbus discovered America, I say, you always forget the important part. He discovered it for the people who didn't know it was there, but the people who were there were like, yeah. But at the same time,
right?
Absolutely, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
You have to put it into the context of the time, as opposed to making it something that is like, oh, even they didn't know it was there until Columbus got inside. By the way, you're living on this land.
Yeah.
And the Spanish Empire, the golden age of Spain, people forget that goes back to pre-Isabella and Ferdinand, merging their empires together, defeating the Moors. At the Battle of Granada, which the Alhambra is very important about that. And then suddenly they had this entire nation of soldiers and warriors. And what are you going to do with them? Oh, there's gold over there somewhere. Just go get it.
Send them to the New World.
So they sent them out there. So these conquistadores were given the cross and given the mandate. And you are spreading the word and you are spreading us in colonial. But there is a lot of gold over there. So it was an inevitable expansion.
Right.
And to look back and say, to try to put our morality on top of it is kind of false, because at the time it was different. However, what we can be absolutely guilty of is if we don't learn from that to adjust our morality today.
And that, so I'm going to throw two things in.
Mm-hmm.
Their mantra, the Spanish mantra, was God, gold, and glory.
Mm-hmm.
That was their purpose. That was their mission. That was their motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But then go to what you said earlier. We can't put our today ideas on those of the past.
Yeah, we can take what happened in the past and say, but today we know better because we learned from that.
And it's one of the things that I get so frustrated with when I watch comedians and celebrities and I'm trying to think of a safe analogy here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll do it this way. Blackface. That's an entertainment thing. So we're entertainers, so we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, blackface was okay. Nowadays, people don't think that was a good thing. But you can't judge that based on what we think now.
Well, yes. However, what you can understand is that blackface was okay for the white people that were doing it.
Right.
That was the context. And it's like, we're really broaching some interesting areas here, but it is like this. It is, I cannot feel guilty for that type of stuff.
We shouldn't.
Okay. What I can feel guilty, and I should be guilty about it, is if I ignore how that history empowered me. If
That's
I
a good point.
ignore that.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm saying. You can put it in a context, and we can easily say, well, that was accepted in a white majority culture. It was accepted back then. What did we learn? If we ignore it and pretend it never happened, then we just are saying we refuse to learn anything.
We haven't learned anything at all.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right.
So I always say it's kind of like, like when we talk about Confederacy, for example, and people want to honor their ancestors, and I'm fine with that. And even with the monument that was in the plaza, somebody asked me what I would do with that, and I said I would leave it there, but I would put up a plaque memorial to explain that many of these people who fought in that war later joined their northern brethren and fought in the Spanish-American War as brothers.
Especially the man on that one. Yes.
And so I would say, put it in context to say that, yes, even they learned something from what was going on. It's a long, long road. But if we just say we're removing it, then we're not learning the lessons. We're just going to fall in. It is the cliche, those who do not read history tend to repeat it. And that is true. So, yeah.
And since we've gotten so far off of,
my gosh, did we?
I mean, the one thing I like about doing some of these shows is that I end up with guests who are so intuitive and conversational that we can broach everything, but it still comes back around to this. And so I'm going to bring it back around to this. Okay. Our entertainment world is really an educational world.
Can be, yeah.
I say in my tours that almost everybody that comes in the Pirate Museum, the only thing they know about pirates is because they watch movies. And you're about to learn, and I say this, you're about to learn what real pirate history really is. And by the end of the tour, everybody goes, that was interesting, that was informative, or other words, and they realize, as I will say, movies have to be entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting is another subject.
Yeah.
And if they're not, if they're interesting only and not entertaining, they'll make nobody any money.
Right.
So hence the reason for black sails, or Hence the reason for the popularity of the first two Pirate of the Caribbean movies, because there was blended so much real history in there. And once they start a franchise, then they'll stray away from it because they've still got the fans.
Yeah. So
movies are a learning tool, but they shouldn't be the only learning tool that we have.
let me tell you a story about that. Because I always look at it this way. When you lecture people, they sit there like this. When you entertain them with the same information, they do this.
Yes.
Now, working on Xena, I've received a lot of emails, a lot of letters from people over a lot of different shows that I've worked on. Xena being one of the most frequent. I get emails of people talking about what they learned from the show and how it changed their lives. I got an email from this guy one time, and what he was telling me was that he and his daughter, young, probably like 8, 9 years old, would watch episodes of Xena, and she would say, "That can't be right." And then she'd go over and she'd pull out the encyclopedia and read up, and she would make fun of our show. And that didn't happen. And he kind of thought it was funny. But then in the email he said, and then one day I realized she's reading about real history because she's making fun of your show. And I sent him an email back and I said, my job is done.
You've accomplished your purpose.
Yeah.
Yes.
She will have the same love for history that I have.
Yes. And I think that's the important part. I know we've gone long, and if we've lost people, Davey, have we lost people in the show?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been 2 hours and 35 minutes.
Yeah, I know. But it's been a fun show, and you know what? Mandy will be able to cut this down and to have some fun with it anyway.
All I have to do is take me out.
So let's go ahead and conclude. We've done everything that we're supposed to do. I do have one thing I want to do though for Steve. He was on our show streaming in, and we always give a gift to our people. And so the gift that we always give everybody is one of our tokens.
I've been actually looking at those over there.
And because you've been on the show twice, you now have 2.
Awesome.
And they're black, which is $100 in Vegas, but they're not worth $100. So don't get all too excited.
They don't go anywhere except with me.
But there's 2 for your on the show.
I was looking at them; they were sitting right over there.
Yeah. I made sure I had some sitting here, so I had them to give out. So there they are. Davey, you weren't too bored sitting there being quiet, were you?
Nope.
Good. I appreciate it. Did Donna watch the show?
Yeah, she did.
Hi, Donna.
So she's still watching. Where else? That makes the light work. Now it'll work. Let me see here. There we go. So, did Donna know that Steve was going to be on the show tonight?
She guessed that because she knew he was in town because of the reunion next week, and your clues were kind of.
Well, I tried to make the clues pretty much open, but okay. So you're in town. So the reunion's next weekend, right?
Yeah, our 50th high school reunion.
Wow. Well,
what happened?
I will be doing tours in the Pirate Museum if you want on Saturday. If you don't have anything going on all day and you want to come over to one of my tours, that would be wonderful.
That would actually be great. There is a thing going on in the day, but let me see what that works out. So that would be kind of cool. Yeah.
I do a 12, a 1:30, and a 3.
Okay.
And I'll send you a message.
I'll have to double check on what the timing is for this other.
See
There's
what
like a
everything's
minor
going on.
event during the day.
But see what happens. And I think I'm only doing Saturday next week. I may be doing Sunday, but I'll let you know.
I'm trying to, the coming back here, I didn't make an official announcement because, keeping things kind of easy and everything. This obviously being an exception. In fact, Thursday night, I'm finally going to go to the Limelight.
Cool.
I actually posted when they said they were doing Rhinoceros, which is kind of like, I'm like, oh my God, okay, can't wait to see how you handle that one. And I posted a thing on their page, or at least on one of their things, that, and all of these years, every time I've gone back, I've tried to go see a show there, and it's never worked out. And
now you get to go.
I grabbed tickets immediately. So,
well, Davey, this was a good show. I'll go ahead and we can put this out here that if anybody was thought it was too long or didn't stay, they'll come back and watch it in the recorded version. But these kind of shows are always well worth it. It's always exciting to me to have really good guests and have conversations, even though they go in tangents in every direction.
They're all over the place.
Davey, I appreciate your paying attention and being on top of everything. And anybody that's still with us, we thank you for, if you stayed with us, I'm going to try to figure out how to reward you.
I'm going to quote the great William Shatner, if you stayed with us. Get a life, please.
Yeah, that's it. So, I mean, and we could probably sit here and talk about all kinds of things, but for now, Davey, we'll go ahead and close out, and let's close out the way we normally do.
All right. Part of the podcast.
Part of the crew, always. We can't do it without you. We could, it's just not as much fun. Or then we could have conversations like this where it's just me and the guest. But we always want you around. We thank you for being loyal supporters, and we hope that you enjoyed this show. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week, Monday night, 8 p.m. Bye.
With wit and charm, they make it clear.